A blonde woman in a teal dress stands before a black-haired man at his desk, reacting in disbelief. The black-haired man, his purple eyes cold, demands she repeat what she just said. With her hands on a document, the blonde woman declares her intent. She wants a divorce. Reading the divorce papers, the man listens as she explains her desire for a peaceful separation, then falls silent. A close-up on his purple eye reveals his focused, intense reaction to her words. The blonde woman stands her ground as his shadowy hands seem to tear through the air before her. He crumples the document, reminding her their marriage was a state matter arranged personally by His Majesty. His eyes narrow with resolve as he insists this is not a decision to be taken lightly. The blonde woman thinks to herself that she expected this reaction exactly. He states plainly that this is what His Majesty has ordered. The determined blonde woman and the stoic black-haired man face each other in a silent standoff. Ding dong. The scene shifts to a grand mansion 3 years in the past. Inside, a butler frantically orders the staff to hurry, announcing the man will be down soon. The entire household staff lines up, heads bowed in anxious anticipation. A young maid with light brown hair worries, recalling being beaten before and praying today will be different. A foot in a red shoe steps forward with a sharp tap. An imperious woman in a lavish red gown descends the grand staircase. As the staff greets her, the woman in red coldly acknowledges that it's a lovely morning. Her severe expression casts a dark shadow over the room. She calls for a maid named Becky, who answers with a terrified, "Why, yes, ma'am." Pointing to Becky's sleeve, the woman in red chides her for tying the knot wrong again. She continues her inspection, criticizing Sven's shoes and Adolf's hair, before ordering a maid named Anna with wrinkled clothes to follow her. She stops, sniffing the air and complaining of a strange smell, while a servant asks what she means. A knowing smirk crosses her face as she seems to pinpoint the source. She points an accusatory finger, loudly declaring the smell is coming from over there. The young blonde girl stands frozen in shock as all eyes turn to her. A servant whispers in disbelief, questioning if the smell is coming from the little lady. The woman in red strides purposefully toward the blonde girl. She confronts the girl, demanding to know if she has any conscience. Leaning in close, she cruelly insults the girl, asking if she even washes herself and saying she smells terrible. The woman in red waves her hand in disgust, ordering the girl away. The blonde girl meekly apologizes. The woman warns the foolish wench that even though she married her son Ernst, no one will ever treat her like a duchess. A royal crest symbolizes the power and authority behind the arranged marriage. The narration explains the marriage unified 2 territories, but for Duke Ernst, it ruined his own secret wedding plans. The blonde girl remembers the painful words, "I don't like anything about you." Her mother-in-law demands to know the status of a handkerchief she was meant to embroider. The girl apologizes, admitting it's not done. The mother-in-law erupts in anger, calling her slow and stressing the handkerchief is for Duke Mechlin. She reminds the girl that the handkerchief is a family talisman for peace and health, questioning why she wasn't more careful. Teask. The mother-in-law dismisses her with a smug, contemptuous look. She grits her teeth, her resolve hardening through the pain. She reaffirms her goal. She cannot repeat the tragedy of her previous life. The narrative describes the prestigious Mechlin family, protectors of the empire and companions to the emperor. She recalls her loveless political marriage to Duke Mechlin, a cold but loyal man, as shown in their wedding portrait. In a memory, a woman in a green dress belittles her, reinforcing a past filled with constant insults. A terrifying image portrays her mother-in-law as a puppeteer, controlling her every move with sinister red strings. Mocked by noblewomen and subjected to daily humiliation, she endured for 3 years, hoping someone would finally see her worth. Then, one day, tragedy struck. A woman named Carolyn died. Despite Carolyn dying from an illness, Becky, the only maid who was ever kind to her, falsely accused her of murder. Duke Ernst offered no chance for defense, and she was condemned, taken away to the execution ground. At the moment of her execution, as the blade fell, she made a wish for another chance. With newfound determination, the blonde woman vows she will never live like a fool again. Gritting her teeth, she resolves to never again die as miserably as she did in her first life. The woman in red, her mother-in-law, impatiently demands to know why she isn't answering her. Her mother-in-law cruelly mocks her, suggesting the Hartmann bloodline is simply stupid. The blonde woman offers a meek apology, promising to be more careful in the future. The mother-in-law internally scoffs at her lack of pride, finding the girl boring and without spirit. Dismissing her, the mother-in-law turns and asks if breakfast is ready, to which a servant confirms. A maid informs the mother-in-law that they have prepared a tender steak for breakfast this morning. The blonde woman's resolve hardens. She will get a divorce before she can be killed again. The scene shifts to an office where a woman in a green dress sits at a desk. The blonde woman, now in a purple dress, quietly enters as the woman in green sips her tea. She asks if she was summoned, and the woman at the desk confirms it with a simple yes. Her mother-in-law presents her with stacks of portraits and lists, ordering her to memorize all the nobles of the Baden Empire. With a cold threat, she warns the blonde woman that she will be punished if she fails to memorize them. The blonde woman bows her head, calmly stating that she will keep the order in mind. HMPH. The mother-in-law scoffs dismissively, remarking that she is good with her words. As she departs, the mother-in-law gives a final, condescending look, doubting the girl can actually do it. The blonde woman remains composed and resolute as the door closes behind her mother-in-law. Facing the mountain of paperwork on the desk, she lets out a determined sigh. She rolls up her sleeves and cracks her knuckles, preparing to tackle the immense task ahead. With a flourish, she spreads the documents and portraits across the desk, ready to begin. A confident smile appears on her face as she realizes this is the very same list she memorized in her past life. She easily predicts her mother-in-law's next tedious tasks, memorizing foreign cooks and writing out the empire's laws. She also remembers being forced to record the entire history of the Mecklin family. Stretching with satisfaction, she believes the memories from her past life will be incredibly useful. A sudden, sharp voice cuts through the silence, asking what she is doing there. Ah! Startled by the unexpected intrusion, she gasps in surprise. She looks up to see the stern face of Duke Mecklin, her husband, and recognizes him with shock. Turning from the desk, she silently wonders when he could have possibly arrived. He leans forward with an intimidating glare, demanding again to know what she is doing. Ha! He scoffs impatiently as she asks what brings him to the study. He closes the distance between them, forcefully reminding her that he asked his question first. She flinches, startled by his aggressive posture and tone. She explains that she is following the ma'am's request to memorize noble families, prompting him to question if they are his mother's orders. He looks skeptical, questioning how well a foreigner could possibly organize such important documents. Leaning close, he orders her to stop wasting energy on useless tasks and return to her room immediately. She clenches her fist, her eyes filled with a quiet, unwavering resolve. She looks up at him and boldly asks why her efforts are useless, surprising him with her defiance. She stands her ground, declaring that as a member of the Mecklin family, she wants to help in any way she can. He looks down on her with utter contempt, asking why he should leave such a task to someone like you. His cruel dismissal echoes in her mind, leaving her stunned and hurt. She recoils in disbelief as he refers to her with a disrespectful gesture, refusing to even acknowledge her properly. She thinks to herself that she had hoped for at least basic courtesy in their loveless marriage. Steeling herself, she tells him she has something important to say, and he asks what it is. What he reacts with shock as she formally requests to be sent to the northern branch of the Mecklin territory. She presses on, stating that even the lowest position is fine and promising not to be a burden. He listens in stony silence as she adds that he can send her wherever is most convenient for him. Desperate, she clasps her hands and pleads that she will do her best wherever she is sent, if she can just be of use, realizing she needs his permission to escape. She swallows her pride. He looks down, thinking her audacious. Duke Mecklin leans in close, telling the blonde woman he thought she was just a quiet person. She steps back in surprise, exclaiming, as they face off. He glares at her, coldly stating his least favorite type of person is one who doesn't know their place. His voice echoes with contempt, reminding her that her value as a princess ended the moment she married. He orders her to stay quiet, do her embroidery, and faithfully fulfill her role as a duchess. A painful memory surfaces of noble women mocking her, calling her a stupid parrot from a faraway island. Tears well in her eyes as she clenches her fist, the sting of past humiliations returning. With a sharp turn of his head, the Duke makes his decision. He announces that he is leaving, turning his back on her. She watches him walk away, her expression a mask of quiet determination. The Duke stands tall and imposing in his formal attire, an unapproachable figure of authority. She reflects that while she was indifferent, she was never disrespectful, seeing her actions as mere formalities of a wife. Now alone, she stands dejectedly before the large, closed doors of the study. She turns away, a sense of defeat hanging in the air. Looking back with a haunted expression, she wonders if she will ever leave this house alive. The scene shifts as elegant boots take purposeful steps across a stone path. A coachman urges his horse forward with a sharp "Hiya!" setting a grand carriage in motion. The carriage, bearing an ornate family crest, rumbles along the road. Inside the carriage, the blonde woman and her mother-in-law sit in tense, uncomfortable silence. The blonde woman gazes wistfully out the window at the passing scenery. Her mother-in-law snaps at her, ordering her not to look out the window. The woman continues her harsh commands, forbidding her from even looking in her direction, to which the blonde woman meekly agrees. The mother-in-law stews in her anger, resolving that she needs to put the girl back in her place. She furiously recalls how her daughter-in-law effortlessly organized complex documents, and even seemed to gain some favor with her son. Infuriating her, she grits her teeth, shocked and angered by her daughter-in-law's unexpected skills. Having arrived at their destination, the mother-in-law impatiently demands to know why the blonde woman isn't getting out of the carriage. The blonde woman looks out at an unfamiliar, grand building in confusion. Walking down a street of what appear to be tailor shops, she realizes she has never been to this part of the city before. She nervously wonders what new fault her mother-in-law is trying to find by bringing her to this strange new place. Distracted by her thoughts, she bumps into a mysterious man with silver hair and an elegant lace mask. The masked man smiles charmingly, placing a hand to his chest in a graceful gesture. The blonde woman stares up at him, momentarily speechless and surprised by the encounter. The man's piercing green eye is revealed through his intricate mask. The mother-in-law's sharp voice cuts in, calling out Eleanor and questioning what she is doing. Eleanor quickly excuses herself, pulling away from the mysterious masked man. Her mother-in-law confronts her angrily as Eleanor apologizes, while the masked man watches from a distance. Eleanor glances back at the enigmatic man, wondering who he could possibly be. She thinks to herself that, despite memorizing all the nobles of Baden, none of them were known to wear a mask. The handsome, silver-haired man stands with an air of refined mystery. Following her mother-in-law, Eleanor mentally dismisses several nobles, certain none of them match the masked man's description. A flamboyant man in a green suit welcomes them with a grand gesture, announcing their arrival. He graciously invites them inside the opulent establishment. The mother-in-law is seated and attended to by the man in green and a female assistant. She maintains an air of bored superiority as the host fawns over her. A woman with lavender hair gestures for Eleanor to come forward. The mother-in-law dismisses Eleanor's presence, telling her assistant not to worry about her, leaving Eleanor confused. She coldly commands Eleanor to stand still and silent, and Eleanor quietly agrees. The lavender-haired assistant watches, perplexed as to why a noble lady is being treated with such blatant disregard. The man in the green suit proudly presents a selection of fine fabrics and clothing options. His assistants showcase two beautiful, newly designed dresses, which he boasts are the latest trends with his own unique touch. The mother-in-law examines a new style of clothing, commenting on the fuller sleeves in the unique light brown and gold color. The man in the green suit dutifully agrees to let the madam try on the left garment first. The lavender-haired assistant offers to guide the mother-in-law to a dressing room, but she is brushed aside. With a sudden, harsh command, the mother-in-law orders a stunned Eleanor to wait on her. The mother-in-law sneers, telling Eleanor that if she is useless for everything else, she should at least learn to serve. She cruelly tells Eleanor she has lived like a pig, and that it's time to start acting like a human being. Eleanor clenches her fist, trying to endure the humiliation as her mother-in-law claims no one else would take care of her. With a flash of defiant realization, Eleanor thinks to herself that her mother-in-law is the real problem. The mother-in-law insults Eleanor's upbringing, blaming her mother, while Eleanor mentally begs her to stop. Eleanor's voice cuts through the abuse, coldly calling her mother-in-law's behavior pathetic, leaving the woman speechless. The mother-in-law sputters in disbelief, demanding to know what Eleanor said as the shop staff watch in shock. Furious, she questions the arrogant look in Eleanor's eyes, which burn with newfound confidence. Eleanor stands her ground, questioning if such petty and childish behavior is suitable for someone from the prestigious Mechlin Duchy. Mother-in-law stares, utterly aghast at being spoken to with such defiance. Eleanor warns that rumors of a petty lady would tarnish the family's dignity, leaving her mother-in-law seething with rage. Having silenced her tormentor, Eleanor announces she is taking her leave and walks away. Letting out a sigh, Eleanor leaves the area as a coachman asks if she is departing already. A maid calls out to her as Eleanor realizes with a start that her outburst was a mistake and poorly timed. Thump! She collapses onto a nearby bench, overwhelmed by her rash actions. As she sits alone, wondering how she survived before, she is approached by the masked man. The masked man's voice startles her as he greets her, noting they have met again. The handsome, silver-haired man in the mask stands elegantly among white roses. The story begins a new chapter, titled Duchess Mecklen's Elegant Rebellion. By a grand fountain, Eleanor sits on a bench while the mysterious masked man stands before her. He clears his throat, explaining that he was concerned she might have been upset by his sudden departure earlier. Flustered, Eleanor is shocked and thinks it is rude of her to remain seated in his presence. She quickly stands and insists that it's completely fine, waving her hands to dismiss his concern. Relieved, the masked man asks where her companions went, and Eleanor explains they parted ways due to an unexpected matter. She says she is just taking a walk, but privately wonders why a nobleman is wandering around without an escort. The masked man smoothly adjusts his ornate brooch. Eleanor comically wonders if this man who is offering favors to a stranger is some kind of weirdo. Smiling graciously, she declines his offer and tells him not to feel uncomfortable. Watching her smile, the masked man looks on with intrigue and softly says, "I see." The masked man maintains his poised and mysterious demeanor. She hears the name Lennox and, though she doesn't recognize it, feels a strange sense of familiarity. The name resonates deep within her, feeling like someone she has longed for over a very long time. A dark-haired man approaches and offers his help, causing Eleanor to gasp in recognition. The newcomer is revealed to be a strikingly handsome man with dark purple hair and a formal cravat. She identifies him as Nestro from the powerful Baden family, wondering what such a high-ranking noble is doing here. His delicate features and pale skin remind her of a portrait she recently had to memorize. Despite his appearance, she senses a cold and demanding nature beneath the surface. With a graceful curtsy, she formally introduces herself as Eleanor von Mechlin. She worries about what they would think if they discovered she was the Princess of Hartmann, fearing their scorn or pity. Nestro's eyes widen slightly in recognition as he addresses her as the Duchess of Mechlin. He offers a respectful apology, admitting he should have been the first to greet her. Lennox also offers a polite greeting to Lady Mechlin, placing a hand over his heart. Eleanor is moved, wondering if this is the first time anyone in Baden has treated her with such genuine respect. Nestro holds his formal pose, his hand placed respectfully over his chest. Lennox questions Nestro's uncharacteristic behavior toward a stranger, but Nestro retorts that calling a duchess a stranger is rude. Lennox remarks that's how it seemed to him, as Eleanor observes the two men, finding their formal dynamic odd. As a red-haired woman bows, the dark-haired man announces his departure to his masked, white-haired companion. Suddenly, the blonde woman gasps and dashes away, surprising the two men. Voices call out, my lady, as she runs with a look of sheer determination in her eyes. The masked man stops her, asking if he might have a favor, and she warily questions what kind. He gently requests a bit of her time, suggesting they share a cup of tea. The blonde woman looks on with a hint of nervousness, contemplating his unexpected offer. The scene transitions to the three of them strolling down a grand, sun-drenched garden path. Awed by the magnificent garden, she wonders aloud if Lennox is of high enough rank to own such a property. She calls out to Lennox, the masked man, who graciously tells her to ask her question. Before she can, the dark-haired man reveals that this was once the palace of the former empress. The blonde woman is utterly horrified by the shocking revelation, her hands flying to her mouth. She realizes with a jolt that Lennox must be a member of the imperial family. Her dark-haired companion puts a finger to his lips, quietly asking her to keep their visit a secret. Lennox playfully flicks the other man's hand away from his face with a sharp tap. The dark-haired man grabs Lennox's wrist, assuring the flustered woman that he will handle his companion's rude behavior. He apologizes for any misunderstanding, insisting that he is, in fact, a very well-mannered person. Lennox slyly asks if he should tell her ladyship about the current situation to gauge her reaction, but his companion protests that he's going too far. The dark-haired man reminds Lennox of his promise not to mention Lady Joshua, but Lennox feigns innocence, asking who that is. Watching the two men bicker, the blonde woman thinks to herself that she can't tell if they're friends or enemies. A sudden question about her life in Baden makes her gasp, catching her completely off guard. She explains that she is still adjusting after only a month, though the food is comfortingly similar to her home in Hartmann. Lennox clarifies that he was asking about the people, not the food, and wonders if she feels lonely among strangers. The dark-haired man interjects, telling Lennox to stop meddling, as the Duchess of Mechlin is perfectly capable of handling herself. The Duchess grimly reflects on the common perception that she has had everything handed to her on a silver platter. A tense silence falls, as Lennox and the Duchess stand facing one another in the garden. Looking up at him, the Duchess observes that he seems to have a lot of questions for her. The masked man Lennox looks down and gravely confirms that he does indeed. With a searching gaze, the Duchess asks him directly just what, or who, he is. Dodging her question, Lennox changes the subject and asks if she likes flowers. The scene shifts to a different man, one with brown hair in a formal blue uniform, standing stoically inside a lavish building. A blue-haired man, Lord Valstein, apologizes to his superior, admitting he doesn't know much about the situation. TSK, the brown-haired man chides him, questioning who would know if the bodyguard doesn't, prompting another apology from Lord Valstein. Lord Valstein inwardly seethes with frustration, wondering how he's supposed to know His Majesty's whereabouts when he wasn't informed. The brown-haired man decides to wait in his office for the king's return and promises to inform Valstein immediately. As he walks away, the brown-haired man thinks it's odd that the king left without informing his own bodyguard. Alone in the grand hallway, he wonders where His Majesty could have possibly gone. He is interrupted by a knock at the door, where a voice asks if he's busy. A red-haired man with a goatee stands in the doorway and greets the brown-haired man, calling him Godfather. The brown-haired man asks for a moment to talk, and his godfather invites him to come inside. 2 cups of tea sit on a table, the men having settled into the office to talk. The brown-haired man apologizes for the interruption, but his godfather insists it's no bother at all. He asks after the old Duchess, and his godfather is pleased to report that she's doing well. With a somber expression, the brown-haired man remarks what a shame it is that the late Duke has passed away. His godfather sips his tea, sensing his godson has a specific reason for this visit. The brown-haired man asks if he's heard about the Empress Dowager's search for a new maid, inwardly thinking, I knew it. He confirms that an official notice was sent to all departments and that the selection process will begin next week. Changing the subject, the godfather asks if he has seen Brianna lately. The brown-haired man confirms they met for tea at the palace a little while ago. With a sigh, the godfather reveals his daughter, Brianna, wants to become the Empress Dowager's maid, much to the brown-haired man's concern. The godfather explains that palace life is unforgiving, where even a small mistake can lead to being expelled by one's superiors. An unseen speaker reflects on the palace, calling it a dirty place of pointless fights and humiliation. A man with red hair and piercing red eyes asks someone to take care of a matter for him. The red-haired man asks a brown-haired officer to help a woman named Brianna adjust to palace life. The brown-haired officer believes that if he, the emperor's confidant, steps forward, Brianna's entrance into the palace will be easier. A sinister-looking woman with brown hair and glasses wonders if this is why her mother has been mentioning Brianna so frequently. Asked if the task is too much trouble, the brown-haired officer remains silent and serious. With a determined look, the officer resolves to speak with His Majesty directly. The scene shifts to a beautiful, sunlit garden filled with blooming white and pink roses. Walking through the garden with Lennox and Nestro, Eleanor exclaims that it's very beautiful. Standing beside the masked man, Eleanor privately notes his impressive height, comparing him to someone named Ernst. Lennox gracefully gestures toward a path, inviting Eleanor to walk with him to an artificial pond. Eleanor pauses, looking at his outstretched hand. She agrees and takes his hand. By the pond, Eleanor nostalgically remarks that beautiful fish used to live there when it was well maintained. She turns to Lennox, politely asking where he is from. She explains her curiosity, stating she's never seen him in the capital or the provinces. Lennox laughs, questioning if she's met many nobles, to which she admits she's only studied the registers. In a cute chibi fantasy, Eleanor boasts about her knowledge, having memorized the countless nobles, a feat that would take months. Lennox compliments her humility but correctly guesses she is asking about his affiliation because his mask is suspicious. He thoughtfully touches the edge of his mask. Nestro suddenly calls out in alarm, addressing the masked man as Lord Lennox. Flustered, Eleanor quickly waves her hands, insisting that everything is okay. She nervously explains that she trusts his identity is certain, since he is a close friend of Baron Jaeger. Lord Lennox remains silent, observing her through his mask. Later that evening, a grand carriage pulls up to an ornate gate. Lennox gallantly helps Eleanor step down from the carriage. Outside the gate, Lennox tells Eleanor he had fun, and she agrees, thanking him for the day. He bids her farewell, hoping to see her again soon as she holds a single pink rose. Eleanor smiles, agrees, and says she will take her leave. She walks toward the gate, clutching the rose he gave her. Alone before the imposing estate, Eleanor lets out a weary sigh. Looking up at the grand mansion under the night sky, she resolves to go back inside. A maid stands before a large door, announcing that she has returned. Click! Eleanor cautiously pushes the door open, peeking inside. Her eyes widen in shock and horror at the scene before her. Her mother-in-law furiously grabs her face, demanding how she dared to embarrass her in front of her favorite tailor. The woman sneers that Eleanor deserves everything that's coming to her. A hand forcefully seizes the mother-in-law's wrist. Eleanor glares, having caught her arm and coldly telling her to stop, shocking the older woman. As her mother-in-law fumes, Eleanor asks if she's resorting to violence to prove she is low class. The mother-in-law struggles in Eleanor's grip, screaming at her to let go. Eleanor calmly refuses, demanding an apology first, which leaves her mother-in-law sputtering in disbelief. With defiance in her eyes, Eleanor demands an apology, stating she doesn't understand why she must endure such insults. The mother-in-law's face twists into a mask of pure rage. Seething, she internally blames Eleanor for ruining her son's marriage prospects and thwarting her plans to maintain her position. She silently vows never to let someone from a fallen nation take away her son or the Mecklin family. Enraged, the mother-in-law screams for someone named Gilbert. A gray-haired butler bursts through the door, asking if the madam called for him. Still struggling, the mother-in-law orders the confused butler to seize Eleanor immediately. As his mistress yells at him, the butler reluctantly grabs a startled Eleanor, apologizing profusely. As Gilbert restrains a struggling Eleanor, her mother-in-law looms over her, furiously calling her a little brat. Tack! The mother-in-law places a pair of scissors on the table, vowing that Eleanor will never hold her head high again. She picks up the scissors with a sinister look, causing a horrified Gilbert to plead with her to stop. Her hair is grabbed violently as she desperately cries out for her tormentor to stop. As strands of her blonde hair are brutally cut, Eleanor's silent scream to be released echoes in the darkness. A stunned Eleanor gasps in shock, her hands touching her newly, crudely shortened hair. The mother-in-law smiles with satisfaction, stating that she is finally starting to calm down as the scissors fall to the floor. She points cruelly, ordering Eleanor to be locked in the attic and starved for 3 days. Elsewhere, 2 servants sigh about how busy they are, attributing the chaos to the Duke's upcoming birthday party. A maid spots the butler, Gilbert, carrying a box of papers and asks where he is going. In a cute chibi fantasy, the maid curiously asks about the documents Gilbert is carrying. Gilbert enters a sunlit room and nervously greets the young lady Eleanor, who sits at a desk with her new short haircut. Looking up from her book, Eleanor calmly returns Gilbert's greeting. He places the box of documents on her desk, explaining that they are tasks assigned by the madam. As Eleanor sifts through the papers, she lets out a sudden gasp of surprise. Her expression is one of utter shock as she stares down at the document in her hands. The scene shifts to a lavish parlor, where 4 noblewomen are gathered for an afternoon tea. One of the ladies asks a blonde-haired noblewoman if taking on a certain responsibility would be too much trouble. The blonde-haired woman sips her tea with an air of serene confidence. A woman in a yellow dress complains that everyone has been asked for recommendations, noting that 5 people have already approached her. Feeling the pressure, she internally frets that she must choose one of them just to save face. A brown-haired lady advises Her Majesty that a simple recommendation should suffice, as a public recruitment would be too costly. She then turns to a woman in a dark purple gown, asking Lady Berenice for her thoughts on the matter. A dark-haired woman replies that the position is for the successor of the Marchioness of Ladza. The woman in yellow argues, questioning why they need to be so cautious in choosing a successor. She waves her hand dismissively, confident that as long as the new lady-in-waiting is properly trained, there will be no issues. Becoming flustered, she adds that the previous Marchioness performed the same duties they all do. The dark-haired woman calmly corrects her, clarifying that the Marchioness didn't just serve, but also represented Her Majesty. The blonde-haired woman speaks up, arguing that an open recruitment process would be fairer and a better way to find a truly capable person. Another lady agrees, adding that the list of recommended families is another reason to oppose the current bias selection method. Her eyes glowing intensely, she questions if any of the recommended candidates could truly be loyal to Her Majesty. The woman in yellow confesses that her reason for voting for open recruitment was to find someone truly loyal. The dark-haired lady clenches her fists, admitting that even if Her Majesty approves, she cannot trust those people. As 2 women look on grimly, narration explains the Emperor's only real support comes from the Empress Dowager. Creak, back in the mansion, a nervous Eleanor pushes open the door to the attic. A maid carrying linen spots her and calls out, "Young lady." The maid reveals the madam has been searching for her, but Eleanor quickly changes the subject, asking about the Duke. When the maid offers to announce her to the Duke, Eleanor quickly refuses, deciding to go herself. Eleanor worries, Realizing her mother-in-law, Carolyn, must have caused a huge scene after their confrontation earlier, flashing back to the tailor shop incident, she thinks with certainty that Carolyn would not have stayed quiet about the humiliation. The scene returns to the royal court, where a red-eyed lady asks Her Majesty in shock what she means. She pleads with the queen to take back her absurd words, questioning who would dare call her old. The woman in yellow realizes Her Majesty is feigning ignorance and using Lady Berenice to indirectly state her own wishes. Understanding the political play, the blonde-haired woman smiles and agrees to hold an open recruitment as per Her Majesty's will. Defeated, the woman in yellow bows her head and says she will begin the preparations at once. The blonde woman touches her chin, already looking forward to seeing what kind of candidate the open recruitment will bring. Elsewhere, a noble woman in a purple dress sits alone, pondering the Empress Dowager's public recruitment of ladies-in-waiting. She realizes this could be an opportunity to place a spy in the Empress Dowager's palace, with which she is often at odds. A voice from off-screen suddenly addresses her as, "Madam." The butler, Gilbert, informs the madam that a guest has arrived, leaving her to wonder who it could be. The butler, Gilbert, respectfully announces that the guest is Lady Brianna. The madam, Carolyn, springs to her feet in startled surprise. The click-clack of elegant heels announces the guest's arrival. Carolyn calls out, "Brianna!" as she rushes to greet the approaching red-haired woman. The guest, a smiling red-haired woman named Brianna, holds a teacup with cheerful anticipation. Brianna curtsies gracefully before Carolyn, stating that it has been a while since they last met. Carolyn warmly takes Brianna's hands, telling her to skip the formal greetings between them. Brianna presents a gift to a surprised Carolyn, hoping that she will like the small token. She reveals an ornate silver brooch with a brilliant purple gem, remarking that it would suit the elegant Lady Caroline well. Pinning the brooch to her dress, Carolyn exclaims how beautiful it is, and Brianna expresses her happiness that the gift is well received. Carolyn laments how nice it would have been for Brianna to join their family, complaining that her son Ernst had a political marriage with the Hartmann princess. Brianna politely states that she is fine as long as Ernst is happy, but Carolyn scoffs, revealing that the couple has separate rooms. Dramatically fanning the flames, Carolyn complains about what a heartless woman Eleanor is for having such pride and living separately from her new husband. Brianna consoles the distraught woman, urging her to cheer up, and Lady Caroline sighs with a weak thank you. Changing the subject, Carolyn asks what brings Brianna to visit, causing the younger woman to pause. With a sly smile, Brianna leans in to share news. The Empress Dowager is publicly recruiting new ladies-in-waiting. A dark, scheming smile spreads across Carolyn's face as she realizes the potential of this information. With a glint in her eye, Carolyn devises a plan, deciding she should recommend Brianna for the position. Elsewhere, a blonde-haired noblewoman with a scar on her cheek looks wearily at a large stack of documents. Her dark-haired attendant asks if there is something bothering Her Majesty. The attendant presents a sealed letter explaining that Lady Mechlin has sent a recommendation. The attendant reads the letter aloud, stating that the young lady of the Liégeois Marquis family wishes to work under her. She holds up the letter, which appears to be 2 separate pages. She clarifies there was a second recommendation for Ernst's new partner, the Princess of Hartmann, catching Her Majesty by surprise. The attendant clenches the letters, her expression tense and worried. A flashback reveals a somber Eleanor at her wedding, a reminder of the painful ceremony and the noble's cold reception. The attendant's eyes narrow with resolve. She praises Lady Brianna's experience, highlighting her unique volunteer work at the temple as a refreshing quality. Her Majesty listens, agreeing that she also found that part of the recommendation refreshing. The attendant concludes that she is not particularly looking forward to meeting the Hartmann princess. Her Majesty smirks in agreement. She thoughtfully taps her chin, contemplating the situation. She reflects on knowing Caroline when she was much younger, remembering her as a very harsh woman. This knowledge only makes her more curious about what Caroline is plotting with these recommendations. The attendant muses that there must be a reason for recommending the princess, despite her poor reputation among the nobility. Her Majesty studies the letter, internally debating whether to tear it up or respond in an extravagant way. With a decisive smirk, she orders a carriage to be sent to House Mechlin the next day. She then instructs her attendant, Berenice, to personally bring the girl to her, an order which Berenice accepts. A cunning look crosses Her Majesty's face as she decides she will play along with the scheme for now. A door slams open as Gilbert rushes down the hall, shouting for the madam. He bursts into the room with his arms wide, exclaiming that something big has happened. Fanning herself, Carolyn demands to know what the commotion is about as Gilbert apologizes for the intrusion, insisting the matter is urgent. Under a dark shadow of shock, Carolyn demands to know what he just said. She furiously questions why the palace suddenly sent a carriage, and Gilbert explains they've come to escort the young madam, Eleanor. Carolyn's face contorts with disbelief and then pure, unadulterated rage. Seething and gritting her teeth, she snarls Eleanor's name under her breath. The sound of her determined footsteps echoes as she storms up the stairs. She finds Eleanor sitting in her room and furiously curses at the damn wench. Looking up calmly, Eleanor listens as her mother-in-law demands to know what she's been up to, revealing Her Majesty sent a carriage for her. With a subtle, knowing smirk, Eleanor thinks to herself that it seems Her Majesty has taken a liking to her. Enraged by Eleanor's defiance, Carolyn seethes, calling her a despicable wench. Thump! Carolyn lunges at Eleanor, violently choking her on the floor. The butler, Gilbert, interrupts the assault, informing a furious Carolyn that an envoy from the palace is waiting downstairs. Still gripping Eleanor, Carolyn sneers and orders for her to be washed up immediately. Eleanor glares back with cold defiance, vowing internally that she won't let her mother-in-law off easy. A title card announces, "The Elegant Rebellion of the Duchess of Mechlin," produced by Casa Comic. Outside, Berenice from the palace stands by a grand carriage, waiting for Eleanor and a simmering Carolyn. Berenice politely informs Carolyn that they will be departing now. Putting on a fake smile, Carolyn wishes Eleanor a good trip, claiming she'll be cheering for her. With a dismissive wave, Carolyn internally threatens to deal with Eleanor upon her return, while Eleanor remains silent. Now wearing a simple light blue dress, Eleanor looks ahead with quiet determination. Her false pleasantries gone, Carolyn watches the carriage depart with a face contorted in a silent, hateful snarl. From a window, a man watches Carolyn's menacing expression as she stares after the carriage. Reaching out as if to stop the carriage, Carolyn panics, realizing Eleanor is truly leaving. Her eyes glowing with malice, Carolyn realizes with dawning horror that Eleanor might not be planning to return at all. Inside the rattling carriage, Eleanor and Her Majesty's attendant, Berenice, sit in a quiet, tense silence. Breaking the silence, Berenice formally addresses Eleanor as "my lady," getting her attention. Berenice notes that she's heard Eleanor has no connections in the Empire and has not yet made her societal debut. In a surprising gesture, Berenice offers to help Eleanor with anything she might need, leaving Eleanor to ponder the offer. A small, wry smile touches Eleanor's lips as she remarks that this is the first time anyone has ever said that to her. Berenice is visibly taken aback by Eleanor's unexpected and poignant response. Eleanor's expression grows somber as she reflects on the attendant's kind words. A dark memory surfaces as Eleanor reveals she never heard such an offer before her regression, flashing back to her own public execution. She recalls being falsely accused of killing Caroline, and that it was Berenice's older brother, Count Verdic, who interrogated her. Eleanor remembers Count Verdic knew secrets even Ernst didn't, making her realize how deeply informed he was and how dangerous his family could be. As Eleanor comes to a grim conclusion, she decides she must be wary of everyone from Count Verdic's family, including Berenice. Elsewhere, a silver-haired man in a military uniform, Ernst, looks on with a slightly confused expression. A dark-haired aide reports to Ernst that Berenice herself went to escort the Duchess of Mechlin. Ernst touches his chin thoughtfully, wondering why his mother, Her Majesty, would summon Eleanor. The aide cautiously reminds His Majesty to be careful with his words, and Ernst acknowledges his slip-up. Ernst ponders his mother's intentions, knowing full well the upper-class nobility's disdain for the Hartmann princess. The aide asks for permission to pose a question to His Majesty, which Ernst grants. The aide leans forward and asks pointedly if Ernst knew the Duchess of Mechlin before their marriage, catching the Emperor by surprise. He explains his suspicion, noting that His Majesty seemed strangely excited when he met the Duchess and questioning their relationship. The aide backpedals with a nervous laugh, claiming he only asked because the Emperor was acting so suspiciously. The Emperor playfully teases his aide, asking if he has a crush on him, prompting the aide to accuse him of having an Emperor complex. Not letting it go, the aide presses the Emperor for a real answer, but Ernst simply hesitates. Giving up, the aide announces his departure and turns to leave the room. Ernst watches his aide leave with a grim and serious expression. Looking out the window, Ernst once again wonders what his mother could possibly be thinking. A close-up shows two hands clasping together tightly in a moment of resolve or anxiety. In a grand hall, a palace official summons the lady-in-waiting candidates to gather. Several noblewomen, all candidates for the position, stand waiting in the opulent room. A senior lady-in-waiting cheerfully explains the day's schedule will consist of written exams, followed by afternoon interviews. A nervous candidate with short brown hair timidly approaches the official to ask a question. She asks if all the tests will really be held in a single day, and the official confirms they will. The candidates murmur in shock, thinking that selecting ladies-in-waiting in just one day seems far too rushed. Brianna speaks up confidently, stating that the timeline isn't rushed at all, because the outcome has already been decided. With a radiant and confident smile, Brianna stands as if she is the undeniable choice. Standing amongst the other ladies, Eleanor quietly observes Brianna's bold and presumptuous declaration. Eleanor, now dressed in a simple but elegant white and blue dress, stands calmly amidst the other candidates. A senior lady-in-waiting in a black dress thanks the candidates for their hard work on the written exam as they gather around a lavishly set lunch table. As a candidate begins to cut into a juicy steak, the senior lady-in-waiting cheerfully tells them all to enjoy their lunch. At the long dining table, the candidates discuss the exam, with one woman asking another how it went, who replies with a laugh that she totally failed. Suddenly, 3 of the candidates stop their conversation, looking towards something with expressions of surprise and disdain. They stare at Eleanor, who is calmly seated alone, and whisper about the Hartman princess, remarking how bold she is to show up. The malicious gossip continues as the women whisper rumors that Eleanor is uncultured, ignorant, extravagant, and that even her own father gave up on her. Unfazed, Eleanor calmly sips her tea, thinking to herself that these insults are nothing compared to what she experienced before her regression. Across the room, Brianna looks down with a pained expression. A lady whispers to her friend that it seems cruel to treat the Duchess this way, especially since she isn't even respected in her own house, prompting a questioning look. The First Lady clarifies that she heard the Duchess and Duke sleep in separate rooms, a revelation that clearly distresses the listening Brianna. Another lady gasps, exclaiming that it means they haven't even spent their wedding night together yet. Watching from her seat, Brianna smirks with satisfaction and thinks to herself that it serves Eleanor right. With a sudden scrape of her chair, Brianna rises, looking directly at Eleanor with a surprised, "Huh?" Now standing before a seated Eleanor, Brianna initiates a tense confrontation. With a menacing glare, Eleanor looks up at Brianna, calling her petty and suggesting she must still have feelings for the Duke. Eleanor continues her verbal assault with feigned sympathy, saying she understands how disheartening it must be to be rejected by his grace. The other candidates overhear and whisper in shock, questioning if Lady Brianna was actually rejected by the Duke of Mechlin. With a sweet, almost mocking smile, Eleanor adds that she feels a bit uncomfortable with the situation. Brianna's face contorts in fury as she realizes Eleanor is accusing her of jealousy. The other ladies wonder what the confrontation is about, referring to Brianna as the haughty lady of Liégeois. Thump. Brianna slams her hands on the table and screams, "Lies!" Enraged, Brianna accuses Eleanor of spreading false rumors, but Eleanor calmly replies that she is simply stating the facts as they are. Brianna demands an apology, threatening to report this to Lady Caroline if she doesn't comply. Eleanor turns the accusation around, stating Brianna tried to drive a wedge between her and the Duke and is the one spreading malicious rumors. Pointing accusingly, Brianna retorts that it's a fact they sleep in separate rooms and she's only telling the truth. With a confident smile, Eleanor asks if she may also speak the truth, leaving Brianna confused and wary. A flashback reveals Brianna desperately clinging to Ernst, pleading with him not to abandon her. Back in the present, a flustered Brianna warns Eleanor not to try and intimidate her with nonsense. Eleanor calmly brings up the past, reminding Brianna that even after clinging to Ernst in such a way, he still didn't see her as a woman, a statement that leaves Brianna utterly horrified and speechless. Trembling with humiliation and rage, Brianna glares at a composed Eleanor. The other candidates murmur amongst themselves, wondering what Eleanor meant and how she knew about Brianna clinging to the Duke. Brianna panics, realizing Eleanor knows something about that night and fears what will happen if rumors spread. Leaning forward with a condescending smile, Eleanor pretends not to have heard Brianna's threats, asking her to repeat herself. Broken, Brianna bows deeply and offers a loud, sincere apology, shocking the other onlookers into silence. Following the confrontation, Eleanor and a subdued Brianna sit together in silence. Brianna sits dejectedly, her pride crushed, as the other candidates have finally fallen silent. A palace official calls for number 58, and Eleanor turns to answer, her interview now beginning. With newfound confidence, Eleanor walks toward the interview room, an aura of light surrounding her. She enters the grand room, standing before Her Majesty and a senior lady-in-waiting, who are seated as her interviewers. With her hands clasped respectfully, Eleanor prepares to address the Empress Dowager. Eleanor offers a formal greeting, wishing for the glory of light to be with Her Majesty. Her Majesty returns the blessing, wishing God's blessings upon Eleanor in turn. The senior lady-in-waiting watches with a frown, thinking to herself that it would be troublesome if Eleanor performs too well. At Her Majesty's command, Eleanor raises her head to meet her gaze. Eleanor and Her Majesty share a quiet, assessing look. Her Majesty cuts to the chase, asking Eleanor what her reason is for applying to be a lady-in-waiting. After a brief, thoughtful pause, Eleanor begins her shocking answer, stating that she did not come here to become a lady-in-waiting for Her Majesty, the Empress Dowager, leaving the panel utterly stunned. A blonde-haired woman in a white dress stands with a look of anxious resolve, her hand clutched to her chest. A woman in a dark dress expresses shock that the Duchess of Mechlin would apply for a maid position, while a younger woman in pink declares it a disgrace to her family. The older woman eyes the Duchess suspiciously, demanding to know why she wants such a position. Standing before her, the Duchess of Mechlin declares that as a citizen of Baden, she is willing to do anything to serve Her Majesty. A moment of silence hangs in the air after the Duchess's earnest plea. Her Majesty and her dark-haired companion sit in judgment, observing the Duchess with stern expressions. The older woman considers the tense relationship between the Duchess and Caroline. She recalls that just the day before, Caroline had cruelly confined the Duchess to the attic. With a slight smile, Her Majesty remarks on the Duchess's confidence and questions if she can handle difficult tasks. The Duchess bows deeply before the seated noblewomen, pledging her service. The onlookers are visibly shocked by the Duchess's unprecedented display of humility and determination. On her knees, the Duchess reaffirms her commitment, stating she'll obey any command from Her Majesty. A hand is gently extended, meeting the Duchess's own in a silent pact. In a gesture of profound respect, the Duchess kisses Her Majesty's hand. Her Majesty looks down at the Duchess, her expression unreadable. The Duchess looks up nervously, a single bead of sweat betraying her anxiety. The young woman in pink excitedly remarks that the scene is like witnessing a knight's oath. A woman in a red-trimmed dress leaps to her feet, furiously shouting at the Duchess for her impertinence. Overriding the tension, Her Majesty lets out a hearty laugh, thoroughly amused. Her laughter subsides as she regains her composure, a thoughtful expression on her face. Elsewhere, a white-haired man in a formal uniform reviews a document with a serious gaze. In a grand office, the white-haired man and a dark-haired subordinate examine stacks of papers. The two men continue their work in a shared, focused silence. The dark-haired subordinate enters the office, approaching the desk. He formally addresses the seated white-haired man as Your Majesty. The Emperor asks if the Empress Dowager has chosen her new lady-in-waiting. The subordinate confirms Lady Brianna has been selected, and the Emperor accepts the news calmly. Teasingly, the subordinate points out the Emperor's prior eagerness and reveals that Lady Brianna was not the only one chosen. He announces that the Duchess of Mechlin was also selected, catching the Emperor's attention. A knowing smile plays on the Emperor's lips as he learns of the Duchess's appointment. Now dressed in a maid's uniform, the Duchess looks out a window, reflecting on being assigned quarters in the Empress Dowager's palace. She walks through her new quarters, thinking that her main goal in becoming a lady-in-waiting was to escape House Mechlin. With newfound determination, she vows this is only the beginning and that she will achieve an even greater purpose. A sudden knock at the door startles her from her thoughts. She opens the door, wondering aloud if it is Countess Lorenz. A dark-haired man storms in, grabbing her arm and demanding to see her as he slams the door. Looking her over, he coldly remarks that she is quite a sight to behold. He angrily demands to know what she was thinking by applying to be a lady-in-waiting. His intense purple eyes narrow as he scrutinizes her. Brushing her short hair with his fingers, he asks if her actions are some form of rebellion. He claims his mother, Caroline, was the one who cut her hair, leaving the Duchess stunned into silence. Correcting him, the Duchess clarifies that Caroline cut her hair with her own two hands. She recounts how Caroline's servant held her down before her hair was forcibly cut, and she was locked away, leaving the man speechless. He accuses her of lying, but she challenges him, asking if he can confidently say he knows everything about his mother. Her smile turns bitter as she begins to speak about Caroline's son. Gripping her neck, he sees that she has some nerve to spew such nonsense. He warns her not to drive a wedge between him and his mother with lies, telling her to just admit she hates Caroline. As tears well in her eyes, she looks at him with pained resignation, thinking to herself that this person will never change. With a surprising grab of the Empress Dowager's collar, Eleanor declares she will let her have the lady-in-waiting position. Elsewhere, Ernst, the Emperor, looks on with a frustrated and angry expression. In a flashback, Ernst tells a departing Eleanor that he will take her back, no matter what. A single tear falls from Eleanor's eye, as she looks back with sorrow. Back in the present, Eleanor walks alone through the palace grounds, thinking she has nowhere to go. Gasp. Her lonely walk is interrupted as she suddenly bumps into someone. A handsome, silver-haired man in an ornate mask smiles down at her. The masked man greets her warmly, remarking what a coincidence it is to meet her there. Eleanor recognizes him as Lord Lennox and comments that his masked attire is a bit suspicious. In a cute chibi exchange, Lord Lennox playfully asks if he's suspicious, while Eleanor thinks he looks like a criminal. Lord Lennox glances around, suggesting they move to a more private location as there are too many prying eyes. He suggests the East Palace garden they walked through before, and Eleanor looks surprised by the suggestion. Eleanor hesitates, filled with doubt as she wonders if she can truly trust him enough to follow. Promising to guide her, Lord Lennox gestures forward, and Eleanor reluctantly agrees to go with him. Now, in a lush, secluded part of the garden, Lord Lennox comments on the place's unique charm. He proposes it become their secret hideout, and Eleanor agrees that it's a comfortable spot away from others. Eleanor points to a small opening in a stone wall, Riley asking if they truly need to crawl through a dog hole. As Lennox laughs nervously, Eleanor privately wonders if he's a criminal, since no noble would crawl through such a hole. After emerging, Eleanor holds up her dress, admitting it was her first time crawling like that. She cuts off Lord Lennox's apology with a bright laugh, assuring him that she actually found it fun. Lord Lennox seems pleasantly caught off guard by her cheerful reaction. He observes that she seems quite different than before and asks about her change in mindset, to which she wonders if she looks strange. He gazes at her intently, his expression serious and thoughtful behind his mask. In a glowing, heartfelt moment, Eleanor's voice softly offers her gratitude. Blushing under the praise, Eleanor looks genuinely touched. The two share a quiet, sparkling moment together in the moonlit garden. Flustered but happy, Eleanor announces that she has successfully become a lady-in-waiting to the Empress Dowager. Lord Lennox calmly replies that he is already aware, surprising Eleanor. Eleanor explains that the selection is the hottest gossip in the palace. Quickly realizing why he would already know, Lord Lennox adds that interest grew because His Majesty was involved, and the Empress Dowager is known for being extremely particular. With a warm smile, Eleanor calls the Empress Dowager a wonderful person, which seems to surprise Lennox. Eleanor blushes as she explains. Her Majesty was the first person to ever listen to her story with such rapt attention. A flicker of concern crosses Lord Lennox's face as he questions if that's really true. Eleanor smiles brightly, adding that staying in the palace also gave her the chance to meet Lord Lennox again. Lord Lennox internally recalls hearing that Eleanor begged to stay at the palace, wondering if it's because she's uncomfortable in House Mechlin. He continues to ponder her situation, thinking she should have been living happily with everything at her disposal. His expression darkens as he wonders why on earth her life has been so difficult. The scene shifts to a grand mansion as an angry voice wonders, "How dare she make a fool of me?" In a lavish room, Brianna's mother stands with a cruel smirk on her face. A dark memory surfaces of Eleanor bidding goodbye, overlaid with the furious eyes of Brianna's mother. She seethes with anger, wondering how that wretched woman Eleanor managed to become a lady-in-waiting. A butler enters, interrupting her tirade to announce the arrival of a guest. He reveals the guest is Countess Lorenz, and Brianna's mother looks up with a tense expression. Her mood shifts to a sly grin as she realizes this is a perfect opportunity to hear about palace affairs. An older woman in a green dress, Countess Lorenz, enters with a cheerful and friendly smile. Sitting across from each other, Countess Lorenz asks Brianna's mother how long it has been. Brianna's mother thanks the Countess for helping Lady Brianna secure a good position, but the Countess humbly replies that Brianna is a clever girl. The two women share a moment over tea, settling into their conversation. Countess Lorenz suddenly sets her cup down, pointedly bringing up the Princess of Hartmann. With a look of disdain, the Countess calls Eleanor quite an audacious girl. Setting down her cup, Brianna's mother thinks to herself that this is the conversation she's been waiting for. Countess Lorenz reveals the shocking gossip that Eleanor asked the Empress Dowager to be a maid, leaving Brianna's mother speechless. With a calculating smirk, Brianna's mother realizes this must be the reason Eleanor is staying in the palace. Countess Lorenz leans forward, about to deliver another piece of crucial information. Brianna's mother takes a slow, thoughtful sip of her tea. Her expression darkens with suspicion as she inquires about a letter of recommendation. The Countess accuses her of writing the same letter for Eleanor as she did for Brianna, which cost her daughter the sole position, shocking Brianna's mother. The accusation hits Brianna's mother with the force of a physical blow. Forcing a smile, she dismisses her momentary shock, claiming she was just lost in thought. Internally, however, she seethes, realizing Eleanor must have had the audacity to forge a recommendation letter. With a cruel, anticipatory grin, she begins plotting how she will make Eleanor pay for this slight. Elsewhere, a young blonde woman in a maid's uniform inspects a pot of soup, thinking it looks too watery. A tired, blue-haired man named Aiden listens as a voice reports that the Saintess is praying for the unconscious emperor. As a hand caresses his cheek, a voice begs the blonde prince to be kind to the affection-seeking Saintess, but he coldly commands them to stop. The blonde prince smirks, ordering the messenger to tell someone named Phoebe not to be presumptuous. Turning to Aiden, the prince dismisses him, saying if that's his wish, he doesn't need to stay by his side, which startles Aiden. The prince muses that if he gives her any time, she'll spout nonsense, then pointedly asks Aiden for confirmation, shocking him. Sweating and clenching his fist, a nervous Aiden begins to address His Highness. The memory of Brianna's mother's sinister smile flashes, reinforcing her desire for revenge. A new scene introduces two serious-looking young women, one with long red hair and another with short blonde hair. The two stand before a room of seated ladies, their backs to the audience as they await instructions. Her Majesty welcomes the red-haired and blonde ladies, who curtsy respectfully in response. The Empress Dowager looks at the two new ladies in waiting and announces that she has a task for them. From inside a carriage, Aiden asks why Lord Vavil isn't wary of a Lady Veritas. In a cute chibi fantasy, the prince casually suggests Vavil likes her, much to Aiden's flustered surprise. A narration explains that Lord Vavil is a being of dark power, loyal only to his liege and moving on instinct, their two bodies like one. Aiden finds it impossible that Vavil would be kind to a stranger, reasoning that it must simply be curiosity. A flashback shows a white-haired woman pleading with a man named Hyperion that he alone must remember her. Returning to the present, the blonde prince wonders if she is the one he's been waiting for. A knight reports that a prisoner transfer was interrupted by a blast. Inside a carriage, a white-haired woman wonders about the delay while her attendant curses the situation. The red-haired lady challenges her blonde companion, asking if she truly poses a threat while awaiting Her Majesty's command. The Empress Dowager explains that she established an organization to aid the poor, which will be distributing soup today. She then officially tasks the two ladies with assisting the organization in her place. The blonde lady recognizes this as the first official test for the Empress Dowager's ladies-in-waiting. Arriving in a poor-looking town, the red-haired lady looks out the carriage window in awe. Hearing that Lord Vavil handled a recent incident, the white-haired woman panics, wondering if she should have fled. She asks about the offender's condition, and her attendant reports he's unable to walk but not seriously injured. She covers her ears, relieved, thinking how lucky the man was to only be injured after being caught by Lord Vavil. When she asks where Lord Vavil is, she's told he's reporting to their liege and will return soon. One attendant worries for their liege's health, since he shares Vavil's pain, but the other assures him the injury is minor. The white-haired woman looks on, sighing in relief. Lord Vavil returns, and the attendants greet him as he approaches the carriage. Opening the door, Vavil finds the white-haired woman resting inside and tells her His Highness is waiting. The two ride together in the carriage in silence. Meanwhile, the red-haired and blonde ladies arrive at their destination and step out of their carriage. The red-haired lady immediately recoils, disgusted by a foul smell in the air. While the red-haired lady wonders about the sewer stench, her blonde companion observes that this supposedly wealthy country has poor people everywhere. The blonde lady takes in the impoverished surroundings with a grim, determined expression. A man with kind eyes and clerical robes approaches and welcomes the two ladies. He introduces himself with a warm smile as Priest Gran, the man in charge of the poverty relief organization. A white-haired woman looks at a man off-screen, thinking he and someone named Rion look like twins. Holding a handkerchief, she asks the dark-haired man if he wants her to wipe away the blood, noting that he's hurt. She gently dabs his cheek with the handkerchief, telling him he should hold on to it. Blushing, the man holds the cloth to his face as she thinks to herself about him. The white-haired woman looks away, flustered, thinking he's actually kind of cute. The scene shifts as the blonde lady introduces herself to Priest Gran as Eleanor, a lady-in-waiting, and eagerly asks where to distribute the soup. Priest Gran gestures for the two ladies to follow him. As they walk past steaming pots of soup, the priest warns them to shout if the poor act threateningly, as mercenaries are stationed for security. Eleanor gives a cheerful, "All right, understood," while her red-haired companion looks on with quiet apprehension. Priest Gran kindly tells them not to push themselves, and to let him know if the task becomes too difficult. Turning away, he rings a small bell and announces that he will leave it to them. Eleanor peers into a large pot with a ladle, thinking to herself that the soup seems too watery. She looks up from the pot with a serious, concerned expression. A hand sets down an empty wooden bowl on a surface. A desperate crowd of poor townspeople surges forward. The red-haired lady screams, "Kaya!" in terror, while Eleanor looks on in silent shock at the approaching mob. Priest Gran steps in front of them, firmly shouting for order. He glares at the crowd, warning them they won't receive any food if they don't line up properly. An orderly line forms as the townspeople receive their soup, murmuring their thanks. As she and the red-haired lady serve soup from large pots, Eleanor wonders where all these poor people are coming from. A foot in a worn shoe takes a clumsy step. A young boy trips and falls with a cry of, "Hack!" his bowl of soup flying through the air. On his hands and knees, the boy stares in dismay at his spilled meal on the ground. Approaching Eleanor, the boy timidly asks if he could please have one more serving. From off-screen, a sharp voice yells, "No!" causing the young boy to look up in surprise. An angry man berates the boy, saying he shouldn't get more soup since he spilled it through his own mistake. The boy looks up pleadingly, apologizing and explaining that he is very hungry. The man sneers as he grabs the boy's shirt, telling him to scram. As the shoe steps forward, Eleanor intervenes, telling the man to please stop. The crowd watches as Eleanor stands protectively between the angry man and the frightened boy. The red-haired lady questions Eleanor, asking if she's really going to give the child more soup. The boy begins to sob into his hands, while Eleanor looks on with quiet compassion. Priest Gran approaches as the boy, whose eyes are covered by Eleanor's hand, calls out to him. The priest asks if something is the matter. Priest Gran looks weary and apologetic, explaining that they have no rations left. The boy wails with despair, while the red-haired lady clicks her tongue in annoyance, wondering why he's crying when it was his own fault. Eleanor firmly takes the boy's arm, telling him not to give up as he continues to hiccup. With a look of intense determination, Eleanor readies herself to act. Facing the crowd, Eleanor announces that she has a request for everyone. She explains to the townspeople that the child beside her accidentally spilled his soup. She looks toward an elderly couple, asking those who have received rations to please share just a single spoonful for the boy. Clasping her hands, she reasons that if many people give one spoon, together it will make a full bowl for the child. She clarifies that she won't force anyone, as the boy looks on, hopefully holding his empty bowl. The angry man who had accosted the boy grunts, clutching his own empty bowl. Turning his back, he scoffs that he doesn't have enough for himself. The boy's face falls as he sees the man walk away. He sighs, looking down at his empty bowl in disappointment. A woman's voice offers to share one spoon, and the boy looks up with a start. A woman adds soup to his bowl, saying he reminds her of her daughter, and the boy shyly thanks her. Inspired by her kindness, other people happily come forward to share spoonfuls of their soup with the smiling boy. Holding his now full bowl of soup, the grateful boy looks up at Eleanor. The boy gratefully holds his hard-won bowl of soup. Patting the boy's head, Eleanor gently tells him to eat, even if it's only half a bowl. The boy smiles brightly, thinking how grateful he is for this small act of kindness. In the middle of the street, the boy bows deeply to Eleanor in gratitude. Touched, Eleanor acknowledges his hunger and softly tells him to go ahead and eat. As the boy eats, Eleanor watches with a pained expression, thinking the scene reminds her of her own kingdom of Hartman before its fall. Watching from afar, the red-haired lady scoffs, thinking Eleanor is disgracing the nobility by associating with beggars. The red-haired lady curtly informs Priest Gran that she is leaving, and he thanks her for her help. Eleanor then apologizes to Priest Gran for also having to depart, but he praises her for her wonderful actions. Promising to see him again, Eleanor turns to leave as the priest wishes her well. Annoyed, the red-haired lady complains about the muddy ground as she walks toward her carriage. As she heads for her own carriage, Eleanor's eyes widen in surprise as someone calls out, "Madam!" She turns to find the young boy, who has run to catch her and is now panting for breath. He extends his hand, offering her a small, hastily picked bouquet of purple and white flowers. Eleanor accepts the flowers with a smile, marveling at the unique purple blossoms she's never seen before. She kindly asks the boy for his name. Catching him off guard, the boy smiles shyly and introduces himself as Lennox. For a moment, Eleanor is flustered as the image of a mysterious masked man flashes in her mind. Composing herself, she gives Lennox a warm, genuine smile and tells him it is nice to meet him. The scene shifts back to the palace, where the Empress Dowager greets her ladies in waiting. Eleanor and the red-haired lady, Brianna, stand before her, Eleanor's dress noticeably stained with mud. Eleanor curtsies deeply, apologizing to Her Majesty for her sullied appearance. The Empress Dowager thinks to herself that Priest Gran had already informed her, surmising Eleanor must have worked so eagerly that she ruined her dress. Acknowledging Eleanor's efforts, The Empress Dowager asks what they did during their visit. Brianna steps forward to report that they distributed soup to the poor. When asked how the people looked, Brianna describes them as depressed, exhausted, and deeply wary of one another. The Empress Dowager concludes that a major disturbance would have likely occurred had they not distributed the soup. Eleanor silently observes that Brianna's demeanor is completely different now that she is reporting to Her Majesty. The Empress Dowager asks Brianna for her proposed solution, and she suggests increasing support and strengthening security to prevent riots. Brianna finishes her thought, warning that hungry, poor people can easily turn into dangerous mobs. Another lady-in-waiting eagerly praises Lady Brianna's exceptional judgment, and the Empress Dowager calmly agrees. A black-haired lady silently takes notes on Brianna's report. The Empress Dowager then turns her attention to Eleanor and asks for her thoughts on the matter. Brianna thinks smugly that since she has already said everything of importance, Eleanor will have nothing to add. Eleanor hesitates for a moment, beginning to speak with the simple, "I." Taking a breath, she looks up with a newfound resolve shining in her eyes. Brianna recoils in shock at Eleanor's statement, demanding to know what she just said while the other ladies look on, stunned. A dark-haired lady thinks to herself that this is exactly why she was against the Hartman princess becoming a lady-in-waiting. The other ladies whisper nervously, unsettled by Eleanor's unexpected response. Unfazed, the Empress Dowager calmly invites Eleanor to explain her reasoning. Eleanor begins to recount her experience, but changes the story, claiming the hungry boy who spilled his soup was unable to get a new serving. She continues the fabricated tale, stating that the child went around begging others to fill his empty bowl. In a dramatic twist, Eleanor falsely claims that the child's bowl was never filled, and says that this failure led them both to a realization. A curious lady-in-waiting asks what that realization was. Eleanor explains that the soup is only a temporary measure for immediate hunger, but poverty itself is a much deeper problem that it cannot solve. She argues that poverty is not a condition that can be solved by the charity of others. The Empress Dowager listens to Eleanor's assessment with a calm, thoughtful expression. Her expression suddenly hardens as she challenges Eleanor, asking what the poor are supposed to do if support is cut off immediately. Eleanor looks down for a moment before proposing an alternative, beginning with the word instead. She looks up, her eyes bright with conviction, ready to reveal her true plan. The Empress Dowager repeats Eleanor's words in surprise, questioning her focus on the slums. Eleanor lays out her vision to rebuild the derelict houses in the slums, which are barely worthy of the name. She proposes employing the poor as laborers for the repairs, paying them with seeds and enough flour for a year. Citing the abandoned fields she saw, Eleanor suggests distributing the land and having the people pay a small amount of their harvest as tax. The Empress Dowager contemplates the comprehensive plan, realizing it offers not just housing, but also a sustainable food source through farming. With a pleased smile, she praises both Eleanor and Brianna for their diligent work. The Empress Dowager falls into a deep, thoughtful silence, while Eleanor waits patiently beside her. SHK. With a sharp turn of her head, the Empress Dowager directs her attention back to Eleanor. Impressed, the Empress Dowager acknowledges to herself that Eleanor is far more intelligent than she had expected. As a memory of a young blonde boy surfaces, Eleanor verbally agrees with the Empress's silent assessment. Changing topics, the Empress Dowager muses on why a child would ever want to leave the Duke's household. She asks Eleanor if it could have something to do with a woman named Caroline and inquires if the investigation is nearly complete. Looking down with a troubled expression, Eleanor apologizes and explains that the investigation will take more time. Eleanor then asks Her Majesty if she knows anything that could provide a clue to help focus the search. The Empress Dowager hesitates, contemplating whether to share what she knows. Her expression hardens as she prepares to reveal the truth about Caroline. She reveals that Caroline is the second wife of the previous Duke of Mechlin, leaving Eleanor utterly stunned by the revelation. The scene changes, shifting to a lush palace garden adorned with bright pink peonies. A smiling, brown-haired lady invites everyone to enjoy themselves as the Empress Dowager looks on with a happy expression. A young blonde lady in a blue dress stops, noticing a unique purple flower and thinking it looks familiar. She recalls that the flower looks just like the one Lennox, the boy from the slums, gave her as a gift. An attendant asks what has captured her attention, and the blonde lady replies that she was admiring the beautiful flower. The blonde lady kneels to get a closer look and asks about the flower, but her attendant has never seen it before and offers to ask the gardener. The attendant insists on checking anyway, even as the blonde lady tells her there's no need to go to the trouble. An off-screen voice offers a powerful prayer for the Emperor's eternal glory and protection. A man with silver hair, in a regal blue uniform makes a dazzling entrance into the garden. The blonde lady is startled as a memory of a masked man flashes in her mind, and she wonders if this man could be Lennox. The silver-haired man now stands directly in front of her on the garden path. Her eyes widen as she stares at him, internally questioning if he could really be Lennox. An attendant's voice breaks her concentration, calling for His Majesty to come this way. As a woman leads the Emperor away by the hand, the blonde lady bows her head deeply in respect. A woman takes the Emperor by the hand, leading him forward as another woman bows respectfully. A lady-in-waiting gestures to a pair of ornate chairs, announcing that the Empress Dowager will be seated with the Emperor. The Emperor and Empress Dowager are seen sitting opposite each other near a fountain, flanked by their guards. The blonde lady watches the Emperor, still wondering if he could be Lennox before dismissing the idea as impossible. The Emperor humbly tells the Empress Dowager that any success he has is thanks to his excellent subordinates. The blonde lady's eyes widen in shock upon hearing his words. Her attendant notices her distress and asks if she is all right, startling her. Observing that she looks pale, the attendant offers to inform the Emperor, but the blonde lady quickly insists that she is fine. The blonde lady steadies herself, thinking that she must keep her head, and that she and the Emperor mean nothing to each other. The Empress Dowager says the Emperor should greet the newly selected people, a thought the blonde lady silently agrees with. A red-haired woman curtsies elegantly, introducing herself as Brianna of House Liégeois. The Emperor offers a polite compliment, noting he's heard good things about her, and Brianna beams with pride. The Emperor turns away, letting out a quiet sound of disdain. The blonde lady stands serenely, framed by a beautiful cascade of white flower petals. The Emperor sits in silence, his gaze fixed on the blonde lady from across the garden. Speaking to the Empress Dowager, the Emperor comments that the Duchess of Mechlin has been doing remarkable work. The Empress Dowager explains she sent the Duchess and Lady Brianna to Haddam, which the Emperor identifies as part of the slums. She continues, praising Eleanor in particular for developing proposals to solve the problems in the slums. The Emperor smiles, acknowledging that grasping the complex situation in such a short time could not have been easy. The Emperor asks Eleanor if she is adjusting well to palace life, and she confirms that everything has been fine. Looking at the Emperor, Eleanor thinks to herself that, compared to her life at House Mechlin, the palace is heavenly. A brown-haired lady in a pink dress interrupts the Emperor, excusing herself to make a suggestion. The brown-haired lady looks on with sparkling, hopeful eyes. The lady suggests holding a masquerade ball during the festival, and the Emperor asks with surprise if she means a special ball. The Empress Dowager politely declines to participate, but the brown-haired lady insists that Her Majesty must join in the fun. A purple-haired man fumes, shouting that they're already swamped with festival preparations and a ball is out of the question, making the Emperor wince. Overruling the objection, the Emperor calmly decides they should go ahead with the ball. Kia, the brown-haired lady, and another woman celebrate, ecstatic about the exciting news of a masquerade ball. The Emperor's expression turns somber and distant as he stares into space. The scene returns to the Emperor and Empress Dowager, sitting opposite each other in the garden. The Empress Dowager thoughtfully touches her chin, remarking that the information they have is too vague. The Emperor notes that it is still remarkable progress compared to before, and his mother agrees. He reassures her that they might find a clue if they keep searching, and mentions that Count Hilda is doing his best. The Empress Dowager instructs him to spare no support for the Count's efforts, and the Emperor readily agrees. Her expression darkens with rage as she recalls that the late Empress died not from illness but assassination, vowing to annihilate the culprit's entire clan. With cold fury in her eyes, she declares that those who insult the imperial family must pay, and the Emperor agrees with her sentiment. Changing the topic, the Empress Dowager suggests it's time he prepare for remarriage, startling the Emperor. She insists the position of Empress cannot be left vacant forever, as the Emperor listens with a pensive expression. He scoffs, questioning what woman would want a man like him, earning a sharp rebuke from the Empress Dowager to watch his tongue. The Emperor offers a faint, melancholic smile in response. The Empress Dowager argues that a true Empress would have the ability to embrace his situation, a trait that can be taught. A faint smirk on his lips, the Emperor recalls how the late Edea called the imperial family a cursed den. The Empress Dowager recoils in shock, demanding to know what he said as he explains Edea blamed them for all her misfortunes. Calling it blasphemous nonsense, the Empress Dowager sits back down while the Emperor wonders if Edea died in vain from the family's power struggles. The Emperor looks on with a grim, determined expression. The Empress Dowager, looking pained, expresses her wish that the Crown Prince will not be hurt anymore, and sighs in distress. She pauses, lost in troubled thought, while the emperor sits quietly before her. The emperor acknowledges that the empress's position cannot remain vacant and agrees to consider a successor to his late mother. He trails off with a however, leaving his conditions unstated as the view pulls back. The scene shifts to Eleanor, standing alone with a pensive look on her face. Later, Eleanor stands in her room wearing a different dress. A soft light streaming through the window, she looks down with a troubled expression, a bead of sweat on her cheek. As she adjusts her dress, Eleanor clenches her fist, thinking to herself that something feels off. A formal introduction reveals the silver-haired man is Vlad Wendt von Exnello-Baden, Emperor of the Baden Empire, also known as Wendt I. Eleanor realizes she's never heard the name Lanok within Emperor Wendt's full name. Recalling the mysterious masked man, she touches her chin thoughtfully and wonders if Lanok is simply an alias. A voice suddenly calls out to Lady Eleanor, snapping her out of her deep thoughts. The brown-haired lady, who now stands before a startled Eleanor, apologizes for surprising her. A tiny chibi version of Eleanor recognizes her visitor as Lady Nora. Eleanor apologizes for being lost in thought and asks Lady Nora what brings her to her room. With a charming smile, Lady Nora asks Eleanor if she would care for some tea. Lady Nora extends a formal invitation for Eleanor to join her for tea in her room. Eleanor looks surprised by the sudden invitation and hesitantly asks for clarification. The scene transitions to a table elegantly set with several delicate teacups. The view pans over a magnificent, sunlit garden, featuring a large fountain and pristine hedges. Eleanor and Lady Nora sit at a table in a beautiful gazebo, where Nora points out the view of His Majesty's garden. Nora shares that this is her favorite spot, and Eleanor simply acknowledges her statement. Lady Nora kindly asks about Eleanor's tea preference, recommending the Ronline blend for a clean taste. Eleanor listens attentively as Nora praises the tea blender and mentions he has just opened a new shop. Lady Nora explains that the fragrant tea is from the new shop she had mentioned earlier. Eleanor decides to have that one, and Lady Nora happily praises her excellent choice. The two ladies enjoy their tea in a sun-drenched gazebo with a breathtaking view of the palace. Lady Nora confesses she's been wanting to have tea with Lady Eleanor, who looks surprised by the admission. With sparkling eyes, Lady Nora gushes about how impressive Eleanor was during the lady-in-waiting interview. Eleanor recalls, with a slightly embarrassed smile, how she knelt and pledged to be the Empress Dowager's servant. A chibi Nora declares Eleanor was like a swordless knight, a scene she found incredibly moving. Nora internally frets that she's brought up painful rumors, flashing back to a memory of a cruel woman yelling before a beeping sound interrupts the thought. As Nora panics, Eleanor calmly observes her, thinking how cute she is and wondering if she was ever so innocent. Nora formally apologizes to Eleanor, explaining she didn't mean to offend her with her words. Eleanor reassures her that no apology is needed, but trails off as she prepares to ask a question. Looking directly at a startled Nora, Eleanor asks what kind of rumors are circulating about her. As Nora hesitates, Eleanor clarifies that she isn't seeking to argue about the truth of the rumors. Seeing Nora's thoughtful expression, Eleanor presses on, asking what her purpose is then. Eleanor explains with steely determination that her true goal is to change the future. Confused, Lady Nora asks what rumors could possibly have to do with the future. Eleanor explains that by understanding the rumors, she can learn how she needs to change things moving forward. Lady Nora contemplates Eleanor's unusual request with a serious expression. Nora agrees to share what she knows, but only if Eleanor promises secrecy, which she readily gives. Nora reveals a rumor she heard from Cordelia Kazak that Eleanor was a reason for the fall of House Hartman. The rumor paints a picture of Eleanor's vanity and extravagant spending, even as her people were starving to death. Nora continues, relaying that Cordelia cursed Eleanor's name and was disgusted to see her parading arrogantly through Baden. Eleanor is shocked, asking if these rumors were spreading even before she was married. A dark memory flashes of a man's face, twisted in a silent, furious clench of his jaw. Her eyes glowing with cold realization, Eleanor deduces this is why she was judged so harshly, and immediately suspects Caroline. An image of a sinister-looking Caroline looms behind Eleanor as she considers her as the source. Eleanor dismisses the thought, realizing it couldn't have been Caroline since there was no talk of her marriage to Ernst back then. Snapping Eleanor from her thoughts, a concerned Lady Nora asks if she is truly all right. Eleanor thanks Nora for telling her, and Nora in turn apologizes for having judged her based on those rumors. Lady Nora shyly asks if they could have tea together like this again in the future. When Eleanor expresses concern about causing trouble, Nora dismisses it and cheerfully exclaims, I like you, Lady Eleanor. Nora extends her hand, making a pinky promise gesture. As Eleanor questions day one, Nora enthusiastically clarifies it's day one of their new friendship. Nora asks for her thoughts, and Eleanor is privately surprised to see this forward, charming side of her. Bathed in golden light, Eleanor offers a warm and genuine smile of acceptance. Later, walking alone through a palace corridor, Eleanor wonders who could be spreading such malicious, false rumors about her. She concludes that between Lennox's situation and this new mystery, she needs time to sort everything out. Gasp! She stops dead in her tracks, startled by the sudden appearance of a man in an ornate uniform. A serious-looking man with brown hair stands before her, his gaze intense. Momentarily flustered, Eleanor explains that she is on her way back to her quarters after having tea with Lady Nora. The man announces he is leaving, and they briefly stand back to back before parting ways. The light tap of Eleanor's shoes echoes as she begins to walk away. The heavier, determined sound of a man's boots follows right behind her. Tisk. Eleanor clicks her tongue in annoyance, realizing the man is following her. She whirls around to confront the brown-haired man who has caught up to her. He calmly states they happen to be going the same way, as the path leads to the Empress Dowager's palace. He coolly explains he has business there, much to a tiny, exasperated Eleanor's disbelief. Shaking her head, Eleanor decides it's better to say nothing more and turns to continue on her way. The man falls into step beside her, and they walk together down the grand, sunlit hall. He suddenly instructs her to walk closely beside him, causing Eleanor to stop in surprise. Eleanor defiantly asks why she should obey, and the man coolly replies that it's so they can match their pace. She clenches her jaw, visibly irritated by his audacity. Wish! Deciding she's had enough, Eleanor suddenly bolts and runs away down the garden path. She glances back over her shoulder, tauntingly asking why she should listen to him. Tisk! He smirks, realizing she's likely getting petty revenge for how he used to address her. He calls her childish and reaches out, grabbing her shoulder to stop her in her tracks. A shocked gasp escapes Eleanor as his hand firmly grips her shoulder. The atmosphere grows tense as they stand facing each other under the darkening sky. He warns her to stop acting so recklessly, reminding her that the Imperial Palace is far more dangerous than she imagines. As he cautions that one wrong step could make her disappear, she boldly retorts that she wouldn't be here if she were afraid. With a determined gaze, Eleanor stands her ground, clutching her chest. Ha! The man scoffs in disbelief as Eleanor turns away, coolly telling him to take care. He stands alone in the garden, watching her walk back towards the palace. From a high window, a hand pulls back a curtain, revealing someone watching Eleanor from above. A serious-looking man with silver hair observes the scene from the window. A brown-haired man in a green vest approaches from behind, asking the silver-haired man what he's been staring at. The silver-haired man turns his attention to the man he calls Edgar, startling him. A sly, confident smile spreads across the silver-haired man's face. The scene shifts to a grand ballroom as his voiceover dismisses a compliment, saying, "You flatter me." In another room, a young man with blonde hair looks at his reflection in a purple dress with disdain, thinking he's not interested in such things. A brown-haired woman surprises him by suddenly holding up a frilly yellow dress for him to consider. As the woman smiles brightly, the young man reluctantly thinks to himself that the dress is cute. A chibi-style fantasy shows the woman twirling with glee while the blonde young man looks on, completely bewildered. Tisk. The woman smiles, privately thinking that he has poor taste. A red-haired woman suddenly appears and criticizes her choice, prompting the brown-haired woman to angrily ask what she said. The red-haired woman walks past them, carrying a luxurious-looking box. She opens the box to reveal a stunning blue and white gown adorned with pearls and gold embroidery. Holding it up for all to see, she explains that the dress's highlight is the subtle gold detailing at the chest. She abruptly presses the gown against the blonde young man, who gasps, "Pardon." The red-haired woman stares him down, waiting for his reaction to the beautiful dress. She asks if he won't accept it, and the overwhelmed young man hesitantly agrees with her. Letting out a satisfied breath, the red-haired woman declares that the dress suits him well. She gives him a final, commanding look and tells him to just wear it. Holding the gown, the young man wonders why she is suddenly acting this way. The brown-haired woman leans in and whispers that he should wear it confidently in front of Lady Brianna. The young man considers her words, deciding it's not a bad idea, since he has no other suitable clothes to wear. The scene cuts to a surprised-looking Lord Edgar. As Edgar approaches, the Empress Dowager asks what brings him to her quarters. He bows deeply, apologizing to Her Majesty and expressing shame for not visiting more often. The Empress Dowager impatiently asks him to get to the point. Edgar stands nervously before her, struggling to find his words. A brief shot shows the blonde young man looking surprised. He clutches the blue dress he was just given. The scene shows him standing before Edgar, who is presumably there to see him. The Empress Dowager looks at Edgar with a confused expression. Seeing him hesitate, she prompts him to continue with a sharp, "Oh yes!" Edgar explains he has information to share, and the Empress Dowager tells him to go on. He nervously clears his throat before starting his report. He begins mumbling details about an upcoming banquet, noting that 21 people will attend and that a cake-cutting ceremony is planned. The Empress Dowager listens to his rambling report with an expression of pure bewilderment. Flinch! The Empress Dowager looks on with a startled expression as Edgar continues his report. Smiling warmly, she dismisses his long-winded explanation as silly, much to Edgar's awkward amusement. Blushing intensely, Edgar thinks to himself that he would actually be happy if that were the case. The scene shifts to Edgar approaching a surprised Eleanor, who is still holding the blue dress. In her now empty room, the Empress Dowager's voice dismisses Edgar, telling him to attend to his duties. As Eleanor handles some fabrics, Edgar walks past her toward a table in the center of the room. He smoothly picks up a bolt of bright pink fabric, presenting it to a startled Eleanor. Eleanor glances back over her shoulder, her expression one of pure bewilderment. Blushing, Edgar explains that he was just wondering if there was any way he could help her. His smile fades slightly as he waits for her response, which doesn't come. Eleanor states she's already chosen her outfits, but he quickly asks if she has selected her accessories yet. He cheerfully suggests the ladies-in-waiting would be of more help, as they have much better taste than him. A tiny, frantic Edgar tries to explain himself to a chibi Eleanor, who just looks on in confusion. Puffed. A brown-haired woman nearby covers her mouth, trying to stifle her laughter at the scene. She whispers to a red-haired woman, wondering aloud if Baron Edgar has taken a liking to the Duchess. The Empress Dowager and another lady observe the interaction, with the Empress wondering if Edgar was always this proactive. A bead of sweat rolls down Edgar's cheek as he blushes, completely flustered by the attention. Bam! He flees the room in a panic, shouting that Her Majesty has thoroughly embarrassed him. Elsewhere, the silver-haired man sits in a lavish room, a knowing smile on his face. Edgar bursts in and leans over a table, vowing never to do that again, but the silver-haired man calmly tells him to sit. Phew! Edgar slumps into a nearby chair, letting out a breath of pure, exhausted relief. He nervously fiddles with the brooch on his cravat, still trying to compose himself. The silver-haired man begins rubbing his shoulders, prompting an annoyed Edgar to ask if he thinks that will solve everything. Edgar lets out a heavy sigh, his face still flushed with embarrassment. The silver-haired man asks about the 5 dresses, realizing Eleanor plans to attend all 5 days of the Thanksgiving festival. He deduces that this means they won't know which dress she'll be wearing to the masquerade ball. Edgar confirms the details, but questions if His Majesty really needs to attend, only to be told to draw the dresses he saw. Sigh. A hand reluctantly puts a pen to paper and begins to sketch. As Edgar diligently draws at his desk, the silver-haired man stands behind him, watching his work. Meanwhile, Eleanor walks through a palace garden, resolving to finish her errand and leave quickly to avoid Lennox. Her heart thumps with determination as she walks forward under the bright sun. A sudden voice asking where she's headed makes her freeze in her tracks. It's the silver-haired man, who stands before her with a calm and gentle smile. From her perspective, Eleanor looks up at the man who has blocked her path. She gives a startled bow, wondering why he always frightens her as he apologizes for doing so. As she insists it's fine, he raises a hand to gently stop her. He notes she seems busy and explains his curiosity was piqued when he didn't see her at the Western Palace. Addressing him as Your Majesty, Eleanor apologizes and boldly asks permission to proceed. The silver-haired man falls silent, his expression unreadable as he looks at her. His expression softens as he suggests they go together, claiming he has business there too, but she only apologizes. Eleanor looks down at the ground, a quiet tension hanging in the air. She looks up, asking if there's a reason he seems to think she's avoiding him. When he asks why else she would, she explains she is merely showing respect to the one who personally arranged her marriage. Her words cause him to flinch, and he turns away with a troubled look. He seems lost in a memory of a turbulent sea, his thoughts trailing off with the words, "I just." Looking flustered, he turns back to her, reminding her of her proper title, Duchess of Mechlin. "I know," he says softly, opening his hand to reveal a beautiful, ornate golden key. He offers her the key, telling her to feel free to use it if she wishes to take a walk. She clenches her jaw, stunned, wondering if he remembers their old childhood promise to make the garden their secret base. As he walks past, he leaves her standing alone with the key and her swirling memories. With a quiet, steady gaze, the blonde woman, Eleanor, looks forward with newfound resolve. In her mind, she begs someone not to show her any more kindness, feeling the weight of their concern. The scene shifts to a grand festival, with brilliant fireworks illuminating the night sky above a palace. Inside, a lavish ball is in full swing, with nobles mingling in a grand hall. A brown-haired man flatters the Empress Dowager, telling her she seems to grow younger every year, and she laughs graciously. He insists he's sincere, playfully worrying she'll soon look younger than him, and she teasingly calls him a flatterer. The Empress Dowager changes the subject, asking about his upcoming marriage to the youngest princess of the Bahama Kingdom. Admitting he's behind on the news, the prince congratulates the Empress Dowager and thanks her for her well wishes. Watching from afar, Eleanor notes the Empress Dowager's good mood, realizing she was close with the man, the Crown Prince of the Lubrate Empire. The Crown Prince suddenly turns and spots Eleanor in the crowd, much to his and the Empress Dowager's surprise. "What a small world," the Crown Prince says with a smile, greeting Eleanor and remarking on how long it has been. He observes that she has cut her hair, and a slightly flustered Eleanor confirms that it just turned out that way. Eleanor falls silent, her expression becoming somber as she looks down. The Crown Prince then invites her to his wedding, asking if he can send her an invitation, which makes her flinch. Looking away, she informs him that she is currently working for the Empress Dowager. Eleanor's expression is one of muted surprise as she processes the encounter. The Crown Prince looks stunned by her revelation, his hand rising to his mouth in shock. The Empress Dowager calls out to Eleanor, who turns and responds dutifully. Smiling, the Empress Dowager declares that, since the Crown Prince has invited them, they will be sure to attend his event together. As the party moves towards the main palace, the Empress Dowager notes that it's time to proceed. A man with light brown hair offers to escort the Empress Dowager, but she sharply rebukes him for his shamelessness. Unfazed, the man casually remarks that he learned his ways from his brother Went. Eleanor watches as the man escorts another woman away, his words echoing in her mind. She realizes with a start that Went is the name used to refer to Lennox, the Emperor, though no one ever calls him by that name. A question forms in her mind. If his name is Vent, then where did the name Lennox come from? The scene flashes to the piercing gaze of the white-haired Emperor, Lennox. The grand ball continues, with guests filling the opulent hall. The Empress Dowager makes her grand entrance, escorted by the Crown Prince and followed by her ladies-in-waiting, including Eleanor. As they proceed through the crowd, an announcer cries out, "Long live Her Majesty, the Empress Dowager!" Eleanor scans the room, wondering why she can't see Caroline anywhere. A brown-haired lady whispers to Eleanor, asking if she knows the man standing over there. As Eleanor turns to look, she sees a familiar-looking blonde man across the room and asks who he is. Her eyes widen in utter shock as she recognizes him, a name flashing in her mind. Adler. She identifies the man, Adler, as a former member of Hartman's royal family and her only living blood relative, her older brother. Rage fills her eyes as she silently fumes, wondering how he dares to show his face at the palace. Seeing her brother flee, she thinks grimly that running away is the only choice for someone with any shame left. A fanfare of trumpets cuts through the air, drawing Eleanor's attention. A royal announcer heralds the grand entrance of His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor of Baden, as Lennox appears. The Emperor exchanges a look with the Empress Dowager before his gaze settles intensely on Eleanor. He walks with purpose past the bowing guests, making his way towards the throne. Two noble women whisper to each other as the Emperor passes by. Seated on his throne, the Emperor keeps his opening remarks brief and wishes everyone an enjoyable harvest festival. The crowd erupts in applause, cheering for the glory of the Emperor and the Baden Empire. With the formalities over, the music begins as a violinist starts to play. Couples fill the dance floor, swaying to the elegant music of the ball. Eleanor stands by herself, an observer on the edge of the festivities. A dark-haired woman approaches, asking if she plans to dance, but Eleanor politely declines. Suggesting they rest together, the woman notes that Eleanor looks unwell, and Eleanor observes that the Baron isn't dancing either. The Baron admits she doesn't care for such events, as Eleanor internally recalls hearing that the Baron is tone-deaf. As they walk together, the Baron wonders aloud who His Majesty will choose for his dance partner, but Eleanor simply says, "Who knows?" At a lavish banquet, it's noted that many young ladies are already lining up to dance with His Majesty, who sits alone on his throne. Ugh. Nearby, Eleanor grimaces with annoyance as she holds a glass of wine. A brown-haired woman beside her notes that His Majesty is the star of the banquet anyway, just as a man greets Eleanor. A man with purple-tinged hair introduces himself as Child Von Jester and politely asks her for a dance. The brown-haired woman recognizes him with alarm as Child Von Jester, the worst playboy in high society, while Eleanor looks shocked. From his throne, the silver-haired man watches as Child Von Jester approaches Eleanor and her companion. Child Von Jester suggests they move to the outdoor terrace for a chat if she'd rather not dance, making her nervous. To her friend's utter shock, Eleanor agrees to go to the terrace, and Child Von Jester takes her arm. He thanks her for the honor, but Eleanor looks away, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. The silver-haired man watches them leave, thinking, "Eleanor, why are you going to such lengths?" On a moonlit terrace, Child Von Jester and Eleanor stand together with a bottle of champagne. He smiles to himself, thinking his plan was much easier to execute than he'd anticipated. A flashback reveals a deal. A hooded figure offers to settle Child's gambling debts if he can successfully take Duchess Eleanor on a date. The mysterious hooded figure holds a bag of money, their face obscured by shadows. Child Von Jester's inner monologue reveals he couldn't pass up such an amazing opportunity. Back on the terrace, he stands beside Eleanor, both holding glasses of champagne. Glancing back inside, Eleanor sees the silver-haired man's stern expression and wonders if he's angry. Child Von Jester tries to make conversation by asking if she enjoys Galleon's poetry, taking her by surprise. He leans in closer, mentioning a specific poem and offering to recite it for her. As she remains silent, he confidently wonders to himself if she's already fallen for him. But in a cute chibi moment, Eleanor abruptly announces she's leaving a bewildered Child Von Jester to question what's happening. He protests that he wanted to show her more, but she simply apologizes, stating she's a bit tired. He reaches out desperately, asking if they could meet again, but she's already walking away. Left alone on the terrace, he wonders aloud with a grimace, "Am I that unappealing?" From behind a doorway, Eleanor peeks out, a satisfied and sly smile on her face. Sometime later, Eleanor enters a room and asks the Empress Dowager if she was summoned. A pair of maids stand silently in the background as the Empress addresses her. The Empress Dowager reveals that Eleanor's brother has come to the palace, stunning her. With a knowing look, the Empress Dowager asks if Eleanor has any idea why he's here. Eleanor nervously explains she lost contact with her brother after coming to the Empire, privately thinking he was the one who cut ties. The Empress Dowager clarifies that Count Adler, the Prince of Hartmann, requested a private audience with the Emperor, shocking Eleanor further. She then reveals that she has decided to meet with him instead of the Emperor. While the Empress Dowager plans to find out his reasons for visiting, Eleanor looks on with an expression of pure dread. The Empress Dowager offers to arrange for Eleanor to join the meeting, pointedly asking if she doesn't want to see her brother. Looking away, Eleanor coldly states that her brother is a self-centered person. The Empress Dowager listens as Eleanor continues, calling him a germaphobe who is both calculative and cowardly. Clasping her hands, Eleanor firmly declares that, personally, she has no desire to see him. The Empress Dowager falls silent, observing Eleanor's resolute expression. Sigh. Letting out a breath, the Empress Dowager says, if that's how she truly feels, then there's nothing to be done. Eleanor bitterly recalls how her brother Adler abandoned her and their sister, stealing the royal family's wealth, declaring he is no longer her brother. The Empress Dowager quietly reflects on Eleanor's past as a princess who once had her own country. Looking at Eleanor's back, she thinks that as a fellow royal, her situation is truly regrettable. Later, Eleanor sits alone on a red sofa, diligently reviewing a stack of documents. Phew, she lets out a sigh, assuming the Empress Dowager is meeting Adler now and wondering why he sought an audience with the Emperor. A voice calling Lady Eleanor snaps her out of her thoughts. A brown-haired lady-in-waiting approaches as Eleanor sets down a paper, complaining about the sheer number of documents. The lady-in-waiting cheerfully notes that today's workload is lighter than usual, adding that she finds the situation fascinating. When asked what she means, the lady explains that while the Empress Dowager always praises Lady Brianna, she only entrusts important work like document reviews to Eleanor, which makes Eleanor pause in thought. Eleanor nervously suggests it's because other tasks are better suited for Lady Brianna, as the lady-in-waiting thoughtfully considers her words. The brown-haired lady-in-waiting takes Eleanor's hands asking her for a favor. She smiles brightly, extending an invitation by explaining her mother is preparing a wonderful dinner tonight. The scene transitions with a soft, floral pattern, shifting the setting. Sunlight glints off a beautiful, stately home, the destination now in view. A cheerful, brown-haired man swings open the door, calling out for the miss. Outside, Eleanor and her lady-in-waiting arrive, and Eleanor warmly greets the man as Hans. Hans asks Eleanor where her mother is, and she replies that she is waiting inside. Leading the way, Hans gestures for her to follow as Eleanor watches him with a thoughtful expression. As she enters, Eleanor reflects that while her husband's ducal house was grand, Count Hilda's home is surprisingly modest. An elegant older woman in a purple gown appears, adjusting her dress. Mother, the lady-in-waiting rushes forward to embrace the older woman in a warm hug. Lady-in-waiting turns to Eleanor, explaining how kind her mother has been to her. The older woman introduces herself as Grace von Hilda, and Eleanor curtsies, introducing herself and thanking her for the invitation. With a welcoming gesture, Grace von Hilda invites them to the dining room, and Eleanor politely accepts. A spectacular feast covers the table, featuring lobster, pasta, and many other delicious dishes. Eleanor's heart swells as she wonders when she last received a meal that was prepared with such care. Seated at the table, Eleanor clasps her hands together, her face alight with pure joy and gratitude. Later, wearing a different dress, Eleanor quietly enters a bedroom. Thump! She collapses face first onto the large blue bed, utterly spent. Sigh. Lying on her side, she realizes the day's fatigue is finally catching up to her. Her lady-in-waiting bursts into the room, announcing it's time for Lady Eleanor to prepare for the masquerade ball. Sitting beside her, she suggests Eleanor wear the turquoise dress from Lady Brianna, but Eleanor groans that she's too tired. The lady-in-waiting urges her to hurry, mentioning that the Empress Dowager is also getting ready. The grand, ornate palace, the venue for the evening's festivities, gleams under the sun. Eleanor stands revealed in a magnificent blue gown and an intricate butterfly mask, surrounded by shimmering light. The Empress Dowager and the lady-in-waiting gasp in admiration at her stunning appearance. Looking on, the Empress Dowager tells Eleanor she looks absolutely stunning. Eleanor beams, replying that she is honored by the compliment from Her Majesty. As a dark-haired woman watches, the brown-haired lady-in-waiting puts on her own mask and wishes Eleanor a good time. Walking through the ballroom, the Empress Dowager laments that it's a shame Berenice won't be able to attend. She adds that it is also unfortunate Lady Brianna is away, as she wanted to show her how beautiful Eleanor looks in the gifted dress. Eleanor reminds the Empress Dowager of her promise for the first dance, which Her Majesty happily confirms she will keep. Smiling warmly, Eleanor observes their interaction, thinking they are as affectionate as a real mother and daughter. A close-up shows Eleanor's eye widening slightly behind her mask. Her expression shifts to one of flustered surprise. The lady-in-waiting marvels at the absolutely splendid outdoor venue for this year's masquerade ball. The Empress Dowager playfully addresses her lady-in-waiting as Miss Jo and asks for a dance, who agrees, calling her Mrs. Jan. Eleanor watches them, amused that they've even adopted new names for the masquerade. She covers her mouth with her hand, trying to contain a small, delighted laugh. A man's voice suddenly asks if she is enjoying herself, causing her to turn in surprise. She finds herself face-to-face with the silver-haired man, Lennox, who is also masked, and she nervously stammers his name. Lennox offers a gentle, knowing smile from behind his mask. He asks if she is enjoying the ball, and she hesitantly agrees that she is having a wonderful time. When he asks her to dance, Eleanor panics and quickly refuses, claiming she isn't a very good dancer. She turns away, clearly flustered, as the sound of music fills the air. The scene pans out, showing elegantly dressed couples waltzing across the glittering dance floor. The Empress Dowager and her lady-in-waiting are seen happily dancing together. A guest's thought bubble observes that the Emperor and Eleanor actually look good together. Lennox suddenly takes her arm, startling her as he says her name. Looking down at her, he asks if she would mind helping him just this once, leaving her to stammer his name again. He leans in, telling Eleanor that no one wants to dance with him. In a cute chibi moment, a skeptical Eleanor thinks, "Huh, you really expect me to believe that?" Turning away from him, she remains silent, clearly unconvinced by his excuse. Lennox earnestly explains he was anxious that Child von Jester might have become her first dance partner. With her arms crossed, Eleanor relents with a sigh, saying she supposes she has no choice. Lennox smiles gratefully, but Eleanor wonders why the Emperor of the Empire would need a favor from her. He gently takes her arm, guiding her toward the dance floor. Now in position to dance, he asks if she's ready to begin, but she just looks up at him silently. Their feet take the first step, beginning their waltz across the floor. They dance gracefully together, surrounded by a romantic ambiance of music and butterflies. As they twirl across the floor, he compliments her, remarking that her skills are impressive for someone who claimed they couldn't dance. Smiling, Eleanor tells Lennox his skills are excellent too, privately crediting her ability to enduring mistreatment from Caroline in her past life. While they continue to dance, Lennox asks if he can make a request, leaving her curious. He admits he doesn't have a specific request yet, but promises to do his best for her if she ever needs his help. He asks if she would at least tell him when she needs help, no matter how trivial, which startles her with its sincerity. Looking down thoughtfully, Eleanor decides that she will be honest with him. A stark memory reveals her deepest regret. She never wanted to be married off to the Duke of Mecklen's family. Continuing their dance, she tells him she doesn't believe it was entirely his fault. She inwardly reflects on her fate, resenting the situation that forced her into a political marriage and questioning why she had to end up in Colton with no other options. Lennox looks down at her and admits that he had hoped she would be happy, surprising her. Behind his mask, a gentle and sincere smile graces his lips. They continue to move together in a beautiful, flowing waltz. Looking him in the eye, Eleanor bluntly states, "I'm sorry, but I'm not happy," causing his smile to vanish as she lets out a small gasp. Their dance comes to an abrupt halt in the middle of the ballroom floor. Oblivious to the tension, the surrounding guests erupt in applause for their performance. They stand motionless, facing each other as the applause echoes around them. Sometime later, Eleanor sits up in bed, the morning light streaming into her room. Sighing softly, she recalls Lennox's masked face from the ball. Getting out of bed, she resolves to stop overthinking and focus on her work. Her eyes fall on the magnificent blue gown from the party, but she stops, confused by what she sees. A closer look reveals a long, clean slice through the fabric of the dress. Shocked, Eleanor picks up a piece of the dress, wondering when it could have been cut. Her expression turns serious as she senses something is wrong and decides to keep the evidence safe. She carefully gathers the damaged portion of her elegant blue gown. Later, while standing in a sunlit garden, Eleanor wears a more modest pink and brown dress. She stops suddenly, sensing she is no longer alone. Turning around, she finds her brother Adler standing there and hesitantly speaks his name. He smiles warmly at her, asking if she has been eating properly. Eleanor stares back with a cold expression as he tells her how worried he was. He adds that he's relieved she looks well, but she pointedly questions his claim of being worried. Adler explains that his letters to her were always returned, which caused him great concern. He asks about her work as a lady-in-waiting and if the Empress Dowager is treating her well, commenting on the Empress's unchanging appearance. Eleanor replies coolly that the Empress is a kind person, unlike some, causing her brother to flinch at the veiled insult. He notes that she seems to be adapting well, before asking if there's anything he can do to help. After she flatly tells him no, he hums thoughtfully, seemingly amused by her response. He then asks if she's upset with him, justifying his naturalization in Bahama as an unavoidable choice to save his life. Clenching his fist against his chest, he insists he agonized over signing the clause that cost them their country. Eleanor's composure finally breaks as she shouts, asking why he didn't just pass the throne to her instead. Her face is a mask of fury and betrayal as she confronts him. Adler stammers, claiming that as her older brother, he couldn't burden his younger sister, but Eleanor inwardly dismisses it as a pathetic excuse. She scornfully tells her brother he didn't want to give up what was his, accusing him of being too afraid to keep it, but too greedy to give it to her. Eleanor presses him further, asking if that's why he handed their country over to a foreign nation. Adler angrily shouts her name, asking if her words aren't too harsh, and questioning if she really thinks things would have been different with her on the throne. He argues that the nobles were only looking out for themselves, and that the royal family had completely lost the people's trust. He adds that rebellion was breaking out all over the country and they were powerless to even deploy the army. Stunned for a moment, Eleanor firmly retorts that at least she wouldn't have handed the country over without even trying. With conviction, she declares that she would have acted with the last shred of pride befitting royalty. Her brother Adler is left speechless by her passionate declaration. He scoffs at her, calling her foolish and claiming she would have just died anyway. Eleanor retorts that she is rather grateful to the Emperor of Baden. Adler insists that without the Emperor's intervention, she would have been stoned to death by the commoners long ago. With a chilling smile, Eleanor agrees that he's right and that she is alive thanks to him. Tears welling in her eyes, she continues with a bright, pained smile that only her persecutors have changed. She clarifies that her tormentors simply shifted from the people of Hartmann to the nobles of Baden, leaving Adler stunned. She recounts her suffering, telling him her hair was cut, she was slapped and insulted daily, and her feet were trampled without proper medical treatment. Tears stream down her face as the weight of her traumatic memories overwhelms her. Adler looks shocked, admitting he thought she was living comfortably as a duchess and a lady-in-waiting. He warns her not to even think about causing trouble in Baden, startling her with his threat. Eleanor defiantly promises to do her best to stop him if he tries anything, causing him to stammer her name in disbelief. Her expression is one of unwavering resolve. As a final warning, he tells her to leave quietly after the harvest festival ends, but she remains defiant. Adler turns and walks away, as a dark-haired man in a purple coat watches their confrontation from the side. Left alone in the garden, Eleanor finally lets her tears fall freely. The dark-haired man who was watching clenches his fist, his face shadowed with anger. His eyes burn with cold fury as he wonders who dared to do such things to her. Later, a handmaiden announces Eleanor's presence to the Empress Dowager, who is enjoying a cup of tea. The Empress Dowager welcomes Eleanor and asks why she requested a private audience. Eleanor states that she needs more power to deal with Caroline and to investigate Rachel, the former Duke's first wife. She takes a deep, steadying breath. Her expression is firm as she prepares to make her case. The Empress Dowager is visibly surprised by her bold declaration. Eleanor offers a confident, knowing smile. The two women sit opposite each other, the air thick with anticipation. Inwardly, Eleanor questions why Caroline would insist on a debutante ball when she has already been introduced to high society at the Harvest Festival. The Empress Dowager looks on with a hint of concern. The Empress Dowager asks if Eleanor's goal is to build social connections, and Eleanor confirms with a simple yes. A slight smile plays on the Empress Dowager's lips as she realizes Eleanor is planning to fully engage in political struggles. Eleanor bows her head and expresses her gratitude. Nodding, the Empress Dowager agrees to help her, causing Eleanor to look up in surprise. Overcome with gratitude, Eleanor tearfully addresses Her Majesty. The Empress Dowager smiles warmly, happy to support her. Eleanor realizes that receiving a gift from the Empress Dowager in front of the other nobles will carry great political significance. In another time and place, a maid in a black and white uniform runs frantically through a dark forest. Gasping for breath, the brown-haired maid thinks she must escape before Lady Caroline finds her. Her eyes are wide with terror, and tears begin to form. The maid looks up in horror as a smiling blonde woman appears before her, and she stammers, "Young madam!" The scene shifts to a group of noble ladies discussing the shocking news of Lady Eleanor's upcoming debutante ball. A blonde woman in a blue dress confirms it, happily announcing that she received her invitation today. A brown-haired woman clasps her hands together excitedly, saying she should prepare flowers for the occasion. Another lady argues that flowers are cumbersome for dancing, but the brown-haired woman insists that it feels nice to receive them anyway. An older woman announces she has a separate gift, causing a red-haired woman to gasp in surprise. A short-haired blonde woman in an elegant dress makes a grand entrance. The blonde woman, Her Majesty, asks her maid, Berenice, if the gift is ready, and Berenice confirms it is while holding an ornate box. A blonde maid presents the open box, announcing it is the gift Her Majesty prepared. A hand reaches into the ornate box to retrieve the gift inside. An elegant blue fan is gracefully unfurled, surrounded by a flourish of pink roses. A brown-haired woman with red eyes clasps her hands in delight over the beautiful gift, while an older woman beside her looks on with disdain. The blonde maid graciously thanks Her Majesty for the gift, expressing her excitement for the next day. Finally, the day arrives, and the blonde maid, Eleanor, stands ready for the debutante ball in a stunning gown. As Eleanor stands in the grand hall, a brown-haired woman excitedly calls her name. The woman links arms with Eleanor, asking if she slept well before her big day, and Eleanor confirms she did. In a cute, stylized moment, the two friends happily dash off together as Eleanor tells her to wait. Eleanor and her friend greet Her Majesty, who welcomes them along with other ladies to the gathering. Her Majesty asks Eleanor if she's ready for her debutante ball, and Eleanor confidently confirms she is. Suddenly, an older woman rushes in with a red book, frantically calling for Her Majesty's attention. Holding the book, Her Majesty recognizes it as a gossip magazine and questions why the woman brought it. Her Majesty's expression turns to one of pure shock and horror as she reads an article. A concerned maid watches her reaction, asking what they should do. Her Majesty grimly calls for Eleanor, who steps forward to see what's wrong. Eleanor's eyes widen in disbelief as she looks at the magazine, utterly speechless. A maid asks what's happening, and Her Majesty explains the news is in the gossip column. The brown-haired and red-haired women from earlier gasp in shock at the revelation. Looking pale, Eleanor nervously asks if the article is about her private life. The article reveals a romance scandal with a smirking, purple-haired man from House Jester, horrifying Eleanor. Eleanor clutches her chest, looking completely stunned by the baseless accusation. The older woman angrily claims that Lord Child himself reported exchanging a piece of a dress as a token of affection, shocking Eleanor. Eleanor has a sudden, horrified realization, recalling the torn hem of the dress Brianna had given her. A brown-haired man, Lord Child, smirks triumphantly while addressing His Majesty. Elsewhere, a purple-haired man with a goatee, the Duke of Jester, sits with a grim and serious expression. The Duke of Jester is noted to be present, looking sternly across the room. Lord Child and the Duke of Jester stand before the Emperor, with the Duke thanking him. The Duke confirms his arrival to the Emperor, who acknowledges his presence. The white-haired Emperor arrives, stating he's heard about the situation as another man apologizes. The Emperor calmly states that it's too early to assume anything based on mere rumors, as nothing is certain. Lord Child looks on with a defiant and angry expression after hearing the Emperor's words. The grand ballroom is abuzz, with the murmurs of high society guests attending the event. Guests admire a pricey statue by Tom Harderson, praising Duke Nestor's taste in art. Two women gossip about a family that has recently earned a fortune through new trade routes. An announcer's voice rings through the hall, heralding the arrival of the Empress Dowager. All the guests turn and greet the arriving Empress Dowager with a unified shout of respect. As the guests express their honor, the Empress Dowager scans the room with a neutral expression. The Empress Dowager takes her seat on a grand chair at the head of the room. Two women whisper to each other, wondering why the Duchess of Mechlin is absent and how she could dare show her face. More nobles gossip about the rumors, confirming they came from Lord Child himself and calling the affair a disgrace to Duke Jester. The cruel whispers continue, with guests blaming the Duchess for falling for an obvious seduction and recalling her allegedly lascivious past. The Empress Dowager overhears the gossip, thinking that Duke Mechlin is the true victim in a matter that affects the family's honor. With a stern expression, the Empress Dowager crosses her arms, clearly displeased with the situation. A man with his hair in a ponytail steps forward, smiling as he asks for the crowd's attention. He formally introduces the young debutantes, asking everyone to warmly welcome them into high society. A musician begins to play the double bass, signaling the start of the debutante ball. At a formal event, three young noblewomen are introduced on a grand staircase. The focus shifts to the intricate, shimmering hem of a purple gown adorned with musical notes. The first debutante, a smiling brown-haired woman, is introduced as Erica von Riley of House Riley. The second, an orange-haired woman with green eyes, is introduced as Jessie von Bucklow of House Bucklow. The third, a smirking woman with dark brown hair, is introduced as Clara von Richmond of House Richmond. A brown-haired man holding a glass announces that the debuts have concluded and the Empress Dowager will now give a toast. The Empress Dowager rises from her seat, holding her champagne flute to address the guests. A man rushes in frantically, shouting for young Lord Evan. The man addressed as young Lord Evan calmly asks what the matter is, and the panicked man stammers in response. The man nervously announces that the Duchess of Mechlin has arrived, as Eleanor is seen standing at the entrance. Two noblewomen gasp in shock, wondering if the Duchess really came. Eleanor stands composed in an elegant blue gown, her hands clasped before her. She stands at the top of the grand staircase, capturing the stunned attention of the entire ballroom. Her gown swishes as she takes a determined step forward. Eleanor pauses majestically before the assembled crowd, radiating an aura of confidence. Smiling brightly, she formally introduces herself as Eleanor von Mechlin. Addressing the guests, she expresses her pleasure at meeting them all on the day of her debut. The Empress Dowager glares with a pinched expression, clearly displeased by this turn of events. A noblewoman looks on, in utter disbelief, thinking this can't possibly be happening. Two ladies whisper amongst themselves, speculating that Eleanor has gone mad from despair. The gossiping women stare in shock at the unfolding scene. Lennox walks forward purposefully as guests murmur about seeing both Mechlins present. Two ladies note how angry Lennox appears, with one remarking that she would be too in his position. Lennox stops before Eleanor, his back turned to the crowd. With a cold, determined gaze, Lennox internally vows that he will definitely drag her back home today. Suddenly, a man shouts that the dress Eleanor is wearing is the very one she cut a piece from as a token for him, young Lord Child. Eleanor is visibly stunned, realizing she's never even met him while wearing this dress. Two men from the crowd shout at Eleanor to stop lying, claiming there is clear evidence against her. Eleanor calmly states that exposing this lie is the very reason she is attending the debutante ball. She reminds everyone that young Lord Child claimed their rendezvous was on the first day of the Harvest Festival. Lennox looks startled as Eleanor clarifies that she was at the masquerade ball on the last day of the festival. A guest gasps in realization, understanding that the accuser's dates don't match up. Eleanor addresses the crowd, asking if anyone present also attended the masquerade ball. She declares her need for a witness who can prove she was at the masquerade ball in this dress. Holding up an ornate mask, she explains that she was wearing a similar one that night. A man speaks up, remembering a lady in a butterfly mask dancing with a tall man, and another guest confirms the memory. Holding a different blue butterfly mask, Eleanor accuses young Lord Child of fabricating evidence to frame her and tarnish the Mechlin name. As a noblewoman looks on with disgust, Eleanor proclaims she has suffered unbearable humiliation from the false affair. Young Lord Child points an accusing finger at Eleanor as she stands her ground. With a confident smile, Eleanor formally demands a trial to prove her innocence. Lennox watches grimly, realizing her demand for a trial is a bold declaration of war. His jaw tightens in frustration, his expression grim. Lennox strides toward Eleanor, telling her he can't stand this any longer, and ordering her to return home immediately. A new voice declares, "What a great idea," catching Lennox's attention. A mysterious man with white hair and elegant dark mask appears, smiling. He walks through the stunned crowd as guests wonder about the identity of this noble guest. Lennox confronts the masked man, demanding to know who he is. A shocking realization dawns on Lennox's face as he gasps. The masked man calmly walks past Lennox and stops directly in front of Eleanor. Eleanor's eyes widen in astonishment as she recognizes the man and stammers, "Your Majesty the Emperor!" The mysterious masked man removes his disguise, revealing himself to be the Emperor. He stands confidently between Lennox and Eleanor, having made his grand entrance. The scene shifts to a large, half-timbered house under a starry night sky. Inside, a blue-haired man sits alone, drinking from a bottle in a dimly lit room. Flushed and drunk, the man lets out a satisfied sigh. He pauses for a moment, lost in his inebriated thoughts. Remembering a stern-looking Eleanor, he thinks that he never wanted to put her in a difficult situation. Suddenly startled by a noise, he gasps and wonders who is there. Looking towards the window, he panics and realizes he needs to escape immediately. He trips and crashes to the floor in his haste to flee. A royal guard stands over him, identifying him as young Lord Child and ordering him to the palace. The guard stands firm, ready to take the disgraced young lord into custody. In a sunlit garden, two maids whisper amongst themselves, with one hushing the other. The scene settles on Eleanor and the Emperor sitting opposite each other at a garden table. Eleanor thanks the Emperor, explaining his intervention helped clear her name and led to a correction in the papers. The Emperor apologizes for not acting sooner, but Eleanor insists she should be the one to say sorry. She looks down worriedly, hoping she hasn't caused His Majesty any trouble. The Emperor earnestly admits he was more desperate about the situation than she was, surprising her. Touched by his confession, Eleanor smiles warmly and thinks to herself what a kind person he is. He then gently asks if there is anything else she needs. A playful smile crosses his lips as he decides to rephrase the question. With a charming and direct gaze, the Emperor asks her what she thinks about divorce. Eleanor is left utterly speechless by his shocking proposal. Later, Eleanor walks alone down a cobblestone path, lost in thought. She recalls the Empress Dowager's theory that Caroline orchestrated the scandal to get her dismissed. The Empress Dowager had declared their goal was to get a confession from Child implicating Caroline. With her mind made up, Eleanor's expression hardens with determination. Arriving at a guarded gate, she asks a knight if the prisoner is there. The guard confirms the man has been restrained as Eleanor enters the prison, where young Lord Child looks up from the floor. Young Lord Child, whose name is Evan, sits dejectedly on a bench, his hands bound in shackles. Eleanor stands before him in the stone cell, a heavy silence hanging between them. Breaking the silence, she states bluntly that she despises even having to look at him. She clarifies that she is only there because she has something she absolutely must tell him. Evan confesses that he was paid to ruin her by someone whose face he never saw. He tries to claim his feelings weren't false, but Eleanor furiously cuts him off, shouting for him to shut his mouth. Turning away, she calls him despicable to the very end. Elsewhere, in an opulent room, a voice notes that their guests have not yet arrived. Lady Caroline instructs a man with a mustache to show the guests in when they arrive. Clenching her fist, she fumes over how Eleanor cleverly used the Emperor to foil her carefully planned scandal. Pacing anxiously, she impatiently calls for her visitor to come in. The door opens, and a man in fine shoes enters, asking if she's been waiting long. Caroline remarks on his quick arrival, to which the man with the mustache simply laughs. With a smug smile, he asks what has made Lady Caroline so angry. He faces her directly, repeating his question about what's upsetting her. Caroline snaps back, questioning if he's pretending not to know, but he feigns ignorance. Slamming her fist on a table, she demands to know how young Lord Child managed to get caught. The man explains that Child was found hiding and drinking in a mountain villa, caught while trying to buy more alcohol. Caroline curses Child as a good for nothing, while the man calmly states that he brought his fate upon himself. She coldly suggests just killing him, but the man clarifies she must be referring to Evan, who knows nothing. Trembling with fury, Caroline declares she will personally publish a new magazine to replace the old one. The man in the patterned jacket asks if Caroline will proceed, and she angrily snaps back, questioning if he sees a problem with her plan. Agreeing that it sounds like a good idea, the man requests 500 gold coins for the project's expenses. Caroline questions the large budget, but the man reminds her that Count Verdic ordered her to give him whatever he asks for without question. He stands with a smug smile as Caroline silently glares at his back. The man's expression hardens as he formally agrees to the arrangement. Seething with rage, Caroline's eyes glow as she internally vows to bring her rival back home soon. A maid rushes across a stone courtyard, calling out urgently for the Empress Dowager. A maid with glasses greets the visitor with a blessing before being asked if the prince is inside. The maid nervously confirms that the prince is currently playing with his toys. The Empress Dowager announces she's going in, but her dark-haired companion decides to wait outside. Looking back, the Empress Dowager questions her companion's decision to stay behind. The Empress Dowager insists that a blonde woman named Eleanor accompany her, and Eleanor graciously accepts. The dark-haired woman who stayed behind shivers with annoyance, thinking how unbearably clingy the prince is. A young, white-haired boy with striking purple eyes clutches a teddy bear, looking up with curiosity. The young prince reaches for the Empress Dowager, calling for his guani, and she smiles warmly at him. The Empress Dowager calls the boy her adorable Hale, as Eleanor identifies him as Prince Hale, son of Lennox and the late Empress Edea. With Prince Hale on her lap, the Empress Dowager gestures for Eleanor to approach, and she dutifully obeys. The Empress Dowager introduces Eleanor to the prince, who shyly repeats her name. Eleanor formally greets the young prince, expressing what an honor it is to meet him. As the prince reaches for her, Eleanor realizes with a start that he cannot see. She gently guides his small hand to her cheek, softly telling him she's right there. A bright smile spreads across Prince Hale's face as he happily calls out, "Ellie!" Ellie! The Empress Dowager notes with surprise that the prince, who is usually shy with strangers, has taken to Eleanor immediately. Eleanor looks upon the happy prince with a gentle, compassionate smile. Later that night, a cloaked man with white hair stands alone in a moonlit courtyard. The man, now wearing an ornate black mask, glances back before entering a darkened building. He carefully peeks from behind a door, observing the room ahead. An older man with a mustache, identified as Count Hilda, respectfully greets the masked visitor as Your Majesty. The masked man, the Emperor, removes his disguise as Count Hilda addresses him. The Emperor invites the Count to sit, and the two men take seats opposite each other. He presents a small, round, blue box to the Count, asking him to look inside. Count Hilda opens the box to find a mysterious star-shaped purple flower and wonders what it is. The Emperor asks for the name of the unfamiliar flower, but Count Hilda admits he doesn't know either. Springing to his feet, the Emperor reveals that this flower was mixed into the tea the former Empress always drank, shocking the Count. He adds that traces of the flower were also found on her body a year ago, deepening the grim mystery. The Emperor looks downcast, stating that this mysterious purple flower is the only lead they have found. Count Hilda concludes that while they have a lead from re-examining the flower tea, they still have a long way to go. The Emperor asks where the flower can be found, but the Count explains his search through encyclopedias and flower books has yielded nothing. Sighing in frustration, the Emperor laments that since they can't search the entire country, their investigation will be a long one. Seeing the Count's distress, the Emperor reassures him, saying he will also investigate the flower, and that they have plenty of time. With a determined gaze, the Emperor examines the purple flower, a crucial clue in his hands. In her room, the blonde woman, Eleanor, sits up in her bed, looking pensive. As she recalls Prince Hal's bright smile, her expression saddens, thinking how tragic his situation is. A sudden sound startles Eleanor, and she quickly turns her attention to the window. Getting out of bed, she opens her window to see who is outside. The Emperor stands below, smiling warmly as he addresses her as Your Majesty and invites her for a walk.